Chapter 1. With a flick of my wrist, I infused Council Member Alden Voss's study with a fresh wave of magic, the air shimmering around us as the magic took effect. The once drab walls bloomed like a time-lapse garden into an array of muted pastels, tailored to the specifications of Emberwick Crossing's most discerning warlock. With my design magic tingling in my fingertips, I turned around and focused on the armchairs in the room. I reupholstered each piece of furniture in velvety textures, then stepped back to admire my handiwork. "Looking good, Sage." My familiar purred from her seat atop a mountain of dust covers and drop cloths. "But when are you going to finish?" "I'm hungry." "Patience, Agatha," I said, stepping back to admire the transformation. "Magic takes time." I tucked my hair behind my ear, then swept it up into a high ponytail so that I could focus on my work. My cat scoffed. "Patience be damned. My stomach hurts." "You can always hunt for mice in the meantime," I teased, scanning the opulent room for more design options. "Just hurry, young witch." Her yellow eyes flashed with exasperation. She looked so pretty in this room. Her black coat was sleek and shiny, her fur reflecting the light from the crystal chandelier above. Rolling up the sleeves on my new bohemian dress, I advanced to the east wall, where layers of wallpaper clung stubbornly to a bookshelf. With a chant under my breath, glowing glyphs appeared on my hands, and I pressed them against the wood. The shelves vibrated beneath my fingertips, but instead of doing as I'd commanded with my spell, the wallpaper peeled back, revealing a passage obscured by darkness. "Holy hell!" I exclaimed, jumping back a little. That was not what I'd been expecting. I peered into the dim space and felt a strange tingle of excitement at the discovery. The thrill of uncovering secrets never got old, even if those secrets might be better left buried. "What on earth have you found?" Agatha asked, as she leapt down from the desk gracefully and joined me at the threshold of the hidden chamber. The entrance was very narrow, and as we stood frozen, staring into the darkness, a cold draft swept the room and ruffled my long hair. I shivered, and not just from the chill. The chamber was etched with mysterious runes that crawled up the walls like sinister ivy. The symbols thrummed with archaic power, the air thick with the stench of dark sorcery. "Whoa, look at these." I reached out and traced a symbol with my finger. My skin prickled with fear the longer I stared at the rune. My gut told me we were in way over our heads here. But when had that ever stopped me? If anything, I was even more curious than before. "Careful, Sage," Agatha said, her voice taking on a solemn tone. "These were crafted by someone who didn't want to be found, someone bending the fabric of malice into an invisibility cloak." But who and why? My heart hammered against my ribs. A dozen prospects came to mind, each more troubling than the last. What had we stumbled into? Agatha examined the markings with a narrowed stare. "I'm not sure. But if they're here, concealed in Councilman Voss's study, then we have to assume he's the one who cast the spell. The real question is, what did he use this place for? What was he hiding? Or what is he still hiding?" I swallowed hard. I reached out, my fingers barely grazing the symbols before the room pulsed with an ominous power that seemed to radiate from the very walls. A violent burst of power erupted, and I stumbled backward, a scream caught in my throat. Oh crap, definitely shouldn't have touched that. "Agatha." The name was a strangled cry in my throat as shadows snaked around me, tightening like a noose around my neck. I fought against an invisible force, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The shadowy tendrils twisted and writhed, tightening their grip around my wrists and ankles. I could feel their cold, inky presence seeping into my skin, dragging me down into the dark abyss that had formed beneath me. Every movement was a struggle, every breath a desperate gasp. I'd once joked that my curiosity would be the death of me someday. I really hoped today wasn't that day. "Focus, Sage." Agatha's tone was sharp. "Remember your training." "Right, my training." The countless hours spent honing my craft, pushing myself to the brink of exhaustion. All those lessons, all those late nights poring over ancient tomes, it had to be good for something. I just prayed it would be enough to get us out of this mess I'd gotten us into. I forced myself to remember the spells, to recall the teachings that had been drilled into me. With a fierce strength of mind, I began to chant, the verses tumbling from my lips in a rush. My hands glowed with a soft blue light as I drew upon my inner power, forcing it to the surface. The shadowy creatures recoiled a little at the touch of my magic, but they didn't release their grip. I pushed harder, feeling the need to survive surge through me. The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the clash between light and dark, the chandelier above our heads swinging wildly. "Agatha, I need your help," I shouted, my voice strained beneath the grip of the dark magic. The black cat leapt from her perch. She landed gracefully beside me, her yellow eyes burning with her powers. With a powerful swipe of her paw, she tore through the nearest shadow, the force of her attack causing it to dissipate into wisps of smoke. "Focus, young witch. Your magic." Agatha's voice broke through the confusion, her sleek form untouched by the maelstrom. Desperation lent strength to my trembling limbs, and I summoned every ounce of willpower. I envisioned a sphere in my mind, clear and pure, and outstretched my hands. Magic surged through me, a torrent of light battling the encroaching blackness. A glowing orb materialized between my palms, encapsulating the malevolent sorcery. "Keep going, Sage. You're almost there," Agatha urged, her voice was now a deep growl. Drawing strength from Agatha's presence, I focused on the spell. The orb solidified, a prison for the murky shadows that tried to escape its confines. Panting, I lowered my arms, the orb floating beside me, my heart thumping loudly in my chest. "Okay, I wasn't expecting that." I managed a shaky laugh, trying to brush off the fear that lingered. "Nor I. Something is deeply wrong here. Boss, what have you entwined yourself with?" My thoughts were a whirlwind of questions and possibilities, but a resolve settled within me. We had to uncover the truth. "Let's keep poking around," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This, whatever it is. We can't just leave it be." Agatha nodded, though I could sense that she was as shaken as I. "We'll figure this out, Sage. You're not alone in this." "I appreciate that, Agatha," I said, shivering due to the chill in the chamber. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Probably get eaten by a grue," she deadpanned. I burst out laughing, I couldn't help it. She was probably right. "Come on, let's see if there are any more clues on these runes," I suggested, moving closer to inspect them. Agatha hopped up onto my shoulder. "Nothing good ever came from secrets like these." I totally agreed with her. Ain't that the truth? I started with the desk. Checking for clues, I opened each drawer. There was nothing there except the normal stationery and paraphernalia. But I didn't give up. There had to be something more here. I slid my hand down and felt the underneath of the desk with my fingers. I searched around until I found an oddity. With a gentle prod, the wooden panel on the top of the desk slid aside. I caught my breath. There, nestled in a velvet-lined nook, lay a communication crystal. Its facets barely glinted in the low light of the councilman's study. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. "Agatha, look at this." I held the crystal up to the light, then moved it beneath the lamp on Councilman Voss's mahogany desk to get a better look. "Sweet Sir Sage, what have you found?" Agatha's eyes were wide as she jumped onto the desk, her black fur bristling. I closed my hand around the cool surface of the crystal, feeling an odd sensation of foreboding. "Let's find out." Once the crystal warmed to my touch, a holographic message sputtered to life, throwing eerie shadows across the walls. The image of Alden Voss materialized, his silver-streaked hair and blue eyes unnervingly lifelike. Beside him stood Corbin, his onyx cloak billowing, his presence exuding an ominous power. I exchanged a tense glance with Agatha. Well, this can't be good. Whenever holograms pop up unexpectedly, it's never to share a cookie recipe. The hologram revealed a dimly lit chamber where Councilman Voss and Corbin stood in hushed conversation. "Voss," Corbin's voice was a low growl, dripping with malice. "The council is growing suspicious. We must act swiftly." Councilman Voss glanced around nervously before responding. "I understand, Corbin. But we must be careful. If they discover our alliance, it will be the end of us both. The balance of power is delicate, and any misstep could be disastrous. I rolled my eyes. Why did power-hungry men always worry about nothing more than saving their own skin? You'd think that being on the council would come with a complimentary backbone. Corbin's stare narrowed, a sinister grin spreading across his face. You've secured the spell? Councilman Voss handed over a scroll, his hand shaking as he did. This contains the incantation you need to breach the council's defenses. Use it wisely. Oh sure, I'm certain he'll use an illicit spell wisely. And I'm the Easter Bunny. I shot Agatha a look that said, "Can you believe this guy?" Corbin's eyes glowed an unearthly green, and he took the scroll. With this, nothing will stand in our way. The council will fall, and we will start a new era. My heart pounded as I watched the exchange, the implications of this conversation sinking in. Councilman Voss has been aiding Corbin? I gasped. But why? Agatha's claws flexed against the wood of the desk. Power, control, the usual. This is bad, Sage. If they succeed, our world is doomed. I swallowed hard. No pressure or anything. Just the fate of the entire magical world resting on my shoulders. I really should have read the fine print before taking this job. Chapter 2. The hologram wavered, showing Councilman Voss and Corbin shaking hands, their alliance sealed. We must act soon, Councilman Voss said. Before we are caught. Corbin nodded. I know, asshole. And once the council falls, nothing will stop the supernatural uprising. You require further protection from the council's prying eyes. I'll ensure that their suspicions are redirected. Oh, brilliant, a corrupt councilman and a foul-mouthed necromancer. It's like the universe decided to hand-deliver my worst nightmares. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. The message ended abruptly, the crystal dimming as the room fell into a heavy silence. I could hardly process what I had just seen. Holy hell. Agatha, we need to act. If the council is compromised, we have to find a way to stop them. Damnation, Agatha spat. That weasel has been using his position to shield that necromancer from discovery. You must tell the High Witch. I nodded grimly, squaring my shoulders. My main role was assistant to the High Witch, and she definitely needed to know about this. I clenched my fists, thinking of the innocent lives twisted by such greed. Dark sorcery, Agatha, necromancy. You know the devastation it can wreak. Of course I do, Agatha said somberly. Remember the Blackthorn Blight? A whole village turned to wraiths. 6 months of rumors about the council, I said, tapping my fingernails against the desk. And now we have proof of corruption. Proof that could get us killed if we're not careful, Agatha warned. Councilman Voss is cunning and he'll not take kindly to being exposed. Then we won't let him know we're onto him, I said, my resolve hardening. Not until we can use this to stop him and Corbin for good. Careful, Sage. Agatha's gaze was narrowed. This will be much more dangerous than redecorating homes. I inhaled sharply through my nose. After everything that happened with the entity, I'd sworn off saving the world and instead focused all my energy on my new career. But it seemed that my interior design skills had brought me straight down the path of corruption once more. I tucked the communication crystal back into its hiding place. I know, Agatha. But I'm still going to do it. Agatha's ears perked up suddenly and the cat hopped down from the desk. Someone's coming. Panic shot through me. I had to hide all the evidence, and quick. I waved my hand to seal the chamber behind the bookcase once more. Agatha and I took up our work positions as footfalls stomped down the hall. Miss Holland. A servant appeared in the doorway. Councilman Voss has returned home early. He requests your presence downstairs. My pulse quickened. Of course. Please let him know I'll be right down. I kept my tone light even with the anxious butterflies causing havoc inside me. What was Councilman Voss doing home so soon? And why did he want to speak to me? After the servant departed, I turned to Agatha. We need to act natural. And not get killed. Be careful, Sage. He's dangerous. Her expression was clouded with worry as she hopped down on the carpet beside me. I know. I steeled myself as together we headed for the grand staircase. Councilman Voss stood at the bottom landing, imposing in his somber robes. His sharp gaze settled on me. I had to fight my own instincts to not to look away. Miss Holland. How goes the renovations? His voice was like silk wrapped around steel. I met his stare evenly. Splendidly, Councilman. I'm finished for today. I'll send my invoice by tomorrow. Good day, sir. Good night, he said, then turned away to continue up the stairs. Agatha and I scurried toward the front door, a wave of relief passing over me. Stepping out from the grandeur of Councilman Alden Voss's mansion, Agatha and I were greeted by a cool evening breeze that carried the earthy perfume of damp foliage and blooming roses. The setting sun colored the sky in shades of dusky pink and burnt orange, while fireflies began their nightly ballet among the hedgerows. Chilly this evening, isn't it? I remarked, pulling my sweater tighter as we walked down the cement path. Agatha's feline form brushed against my ankles. Better than scorching heat. And the cold never bothered me. I know you're tough. I smiled, though my thoughts were a tempest of worry. What we'd found in Councilman Voss's study had shaken me. How could someone overseeing the protection of our magical world be conspiring to be a part of its potential undoing? Let's make a call and let Ingrid know what we found, Agatha suggested. Good idea, I said, but let's get home before we do. I don't want anyone overhearing us. I'd brought my broomstick with me, as the councilman's house was only one town over from my parents' place. I climbed aboard and cast a spell, making the broom levitate in the air. Agatha hopped aboard in front of me, and we flew into the air. We made our way towards home, over the fields and through the forest, until finally, the cobblestone streets of Emberwick Crossing came into view. The colors of the sky had deepened by the time we reached my childhood home. The exterior was still painted blue and white, just as it always had been. The porch light threw a mellow brilliance across the wraparound deck, where the swing swayed gently in the breeze. It's good to be home, I murmured, stepping onto the porch with a sense of relief. It certainly is, young witch, Agatha said. Right. I plucked out a small, opalescent stone from my pocket, my own communication crystal linking me to the High Witch. No time like the present. With a gentle rub, the crystal glowed warmly, projecting Ingrid's image into the air before us. Yes, Sage. How may I help you? Ingrid said without preamble, her violet eyes sharp even through the ether. We found something troubling, and we thought it best to share with you as soon as possible. Councilman Voss has been conspiring with Corbin Grimm, I said, my voice laden with trepidation and urgency. Is that so? Ingrid asked, then sighed heavily. We have graver concerns at the council, I'm afraid. But your report is noted. Sorry? Graver concerns? With all due respect, High Witch, this is serious. Follow your instructions, Sage. For now, I require you to proceed with the renovation on Councilman Voss's residence. But from now on you'll need to weave surveillance spells into your designs as well. We'll monitor him and the other two we have on our radar very closely. I frowned. Isn't that a breach of trust? And was definitely not part of the contract I'd originally agreed to. Trust is a luxury we can no longer afford. Do it discreetly. I rely on your talent, Sage, Ingrid said before the connection ended. I was left with a hollow feeling right in the pit of my stomach. Are you comfortable with this? Agatha asked. I sighed. No, but what choice do I have? If Ingrid believes it's necessary. Sometimes what is necessary is not always right. Agatha grunted. Maybe so, but I need to prove I'm more than just a designer. I need to show Ingrid that I'm someone she can rely on. It shouldn't have been such a hard decision to make. This councilman was part of a conspiracy to bring down our community. I should want to help the High Witch gather intel on him. And yet, inside, I was wrestling with the conflict between loyalty and conscience. Even if it means spying on those you're meant to serve? Agatha's question poked at me. Especially then. I answered. I have to believe Ingrid knows best. She was the High Witch. Surely she knew the right course for us all. Faith in our leaders is noble, but remember to keep faith in yourself too. You're no puppet, Sage. Your magic means they are your choices and yours alone. I sighed. Yeah. I guess. It was finally time to go inside. I pulled the key out of my pocket and unlocked my front door. I pushed it open, but unease twisted my insides. Before I could ponder the issues further, Evie walked down the path. Hi, Sage. Hi, Agatha. Her shoulder-length black hair framed her face in waves, and she wore a leather jacket over a pink dress, her style effortlessly edgy as always. Hi, Evie, I said, ushering her inside. My living room was already cozy, but I started a fire in the hearth just to make things more welcoming. So with the fireplace crackling softly, I sat down on the couch and readied myself to confide in my best friend. I'm glad you stopped by. There's so much happening. Tell me everything. Evie sat on the sofa opposite me and kicked off her shoes. I recounted the discovery of the hidden chamber, the runes, and the crystal's message about Councilman Alden Voss. My voice trembled despite my attempts at staying calm. Dark sorcery at Councilman Voss's house? That's unnerving, Evie said when I finally finished. That is one word for it, Agatha replied. I tucked a strand of blue hair behind my ear. But there's more. Ingrid has asked me to weave surveillance spells into my designs. Sage, that's serious stuff. Are you sure? Evie started to say, then Agatha cut in. Of course she's not sure. It reeks of ethical muck, Agatha said from her spot curled up on the windowsill. I shrugged. Well, I kinda have to, Evie. I mean, this guy is bad. And we need to prevent something terrible happening. What if? Evie reached out and squeezed my hand. I know you're trying to do the right thing, but be careful. Once you start walking the line of ethically gray areas, it's hard to go back. I know, Evie, I said, feeling a fission of anxiety. I just hope I'm making the right choice. Also, Sage, you know that keeping an eye on someone can be done without blinders on your own conscience, Agatha said. Agatha's got a point, Evie agreed. Keeping a close eye on Councilman Voss will probably reveal more than just his secrets. Let's hope it's enough to stop whatever terrible plan they're hatching, I said, staring into the fire. Because the last thing I wanted was to become a part of the magical community that justified using their powers for evil. Chapter 3. The moment I stepped into Councilman Alden Voss's mansion again, I tensed up under the weight of what had been asked of me. My fingers trailed over the oak banister, leaving a trail of glimmering glyphs in their wake. The surveillance spells had taken me all night to master. Agatha's voice cut through my focus. Careful, young witch. These walls have ears and egos and staff lurking about. I couldn't suppress a grin at her dry tone. Then let's not give them anything to eavesdrop on. My hands moved deftly, weaving magic into the tapestries and under the rugs as I walked through the house. That should do it, I said as I sensed the enchantments take hold. Your optimism is adorable but misplaced, Agatha said. You're playing a dangerous game here. Isn't danger a bit exciting, though? I whispered back, feeling the thrill of using my own magic pumping through my veins. The chandeliers above us blinked off and on as if in agreement, and I knew we were set. Every muffled voice within these walls would find its way to me now. Excitement is for fools rushing toward their demise. My cat scoffed, her tail flicking with each sassy syllable. Maybe, but some mysteries are worth solving. And we make a pretty good team, don't you think? Flattery will get you nowhere. Agatha shook her head, but I caught the hint of a purr in her voice. I moved on to the living room, where Councilman Voss had requested a more inviting atmosphere. I could see what he meant. The place felt like an opulent mausoleum. A few swipes of my hand and the walls shimmered, transforming from cold marble to warm oak paneling. While I arranged cushions and drapes, memories of my childhood home flooded back. Our homey living room, with its mismatched furniture and faded photographs, had always felt more alive than this sterile showpiece. What they would have thought about me using my magical talents to redecorate for a shady politician. They probably would have gotten a good chuckle out of it. What's got you all misty-eyed? Agatha hopped onto a newly upholstered armchair. Just thinking about Mom and Dad, I murmured more to myself than her. I think they'd be happy that I followed my dream of becoming an interior designer. Even if that dream had taken a few unforeseen detours along the way. Life sure had a twisted sense of humor sometimes. Well, I think you have a flair for the dramatic, Agatha said. My parents' deaths were still a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Their demise was still considered an unfortunate car accident. But nothing in this magical world was simple, though. My heart ached, not just for their loss, but for the truth that seemed so elusive. Call it intuition, or possibly just stubborn denial, but I wouldn't rest until I had answers. Even if it meant stirring up secrets this town wanted buried. All right, that's enough moping around, Agatha said, nudging my leg with her head. You've got a job to finish. I sighed, shaking off the melancholy. Yeah, you're right. Let's make this place look like it belongs to someone who isn't plotting the end of the world. By the time I'd finished, the mansion looked like a completely different place. Updated and refreshed. Light and bright and fabulous. And despite its makeover, I knew the truth. This mansion was hiding secrets in every shadowed corner. Just like its owner. In my experience, the prettier the facade, the uglier the truth lurking beneath. But hey, I wasn't here to judge. Just to make sure Voss's shady dealings never came to light. Time to head home, I told Agatha, stretching my arms above my head. I want to search the attic and see if we can find anything on my parents' death. I think my grandma had started to look into it before she passed away. Think we'll find any answers tonight? Only one way to find out, Agatha replied, her tail flicking excitedly from side to side. Knowing my luck, we'd probably just unearth more questions. But I had to try. For my parents, and for that little girl inside me who never really got to say goodbye. Time to crack open Pandora's box and see what secrets came spilling out. We decided to walk back to Emberwick Crossing, and the gaslit street lamps created long shadows on the walkways. The town was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and distant hooting of owls. The walk gave me time to reflect. My parents' faces formed in my mind, and I tried to remember the sound of their laughter. Why did they have to leave me so soon, and all alone too? And why did it feel like their deaths were more than just a random car crash? You're brooding again, Agatha remarked. I paused and looked down at her as we reached our front porch. Can't help it. It's like there's this gap in my life that nothing can fill. Except maybe the truth, she said softly, surprising me with her gentleness. Yeah, I said. The truth. We entered our house, and I went straight to the bathroom to wash up. Once settled, we pulled down the ladder and climbed the narrow stairs up to the attic. Each step groaned under our weight. The air grew cooler the higher we went, and the odor of old paper and dust tickled my nose. The attic held a lot of my family history, with stacks of mystical tomes, photo albums, and journals sprinkled across two worn wooden desks. Cobwebs hung like delicate lace from the rafters, and the single window let in a soft, diffused light. Well, this is snug, Agatha said, jumping up onto a pile of hardbacks, then sneezed rather loudly. I chuckled a little, then started casting spells, cleaning the attic of all the dust, and creating 2 floor lamps to give us better light to work under. Once the place was clean, I grasped a dusty ledger from off the desk, then sat in a squeaky chair with wheels. Let's get to work. What secrets do you hold? Hopefully something that won't bore me to death. Agatha snapped, her tail flicking impatiently. Always eager for drama, aren't you? I teased, flipping through the pages. Among other things. The cat was eyeing a moth fluttering near the window. I resumed sifting through the journals and ledgers. My fingers trailed across yellowed pages filled with delicate handwriting. Memories of my childhood flashed in my mind, my parents' laughter ringing in our living room, their tender, loving embraces. And how everything had changed the year I started at the Institute for the Arcane Arts. The car accident, the sudden silence that replaced their voices. How much longer shall we stay up here? Agatha complained, knocking over a small trinket box with one of her paws. The lid clattered open, revealing an old locket and some old photographs. I'm starving. Not now, Agatha, I snapped, more harshly than I'd intended. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. The frustration was boiling up, making my hands shake. I searched through the pages at a frantic pace. My gaze scanned line after line, seeking, yearning for any clue that could piece together the puzzle of their deaths. Young witch, you're about to tear those pages apart. Huh. Oh yes, my bad, I murmured, loosening my grip. It's just, they died right when I started magic college. It feels like there's something I'm missing, something they never got to tell me. Well, it could be in here somewhere, Agatha said, her tone uncharacteristically soft. This place is full of memories and journals. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Yeah, I think so too. I lifted another journal from the pile, its leather cover worn and faded. My heart missed a beat when I saw the recognizable scrawl on the first page, Grandma Leanne's handwriting. She had always been the secretive type, but this was unexpected. I would never have thought we'd have something so personal of hers in our house. I read through the diary, my pulse quickening with each entry. What's that? Agatha asked. Grandma Leanne's journal. Looks like she was investigating Mom and Dad's deaths too. Each page lifted the veil on a clandestine world of secret meetings and covert transactions. One entry caught my eye, hinting at the possibility that dark sorcerers had orchestrated my parents' deaths. Well, holy hell, I whispered, feeling a chill rush over my skin. I'd considered that, but to see it written down in black and white. I could barely believe it. Tears welled in my eyes and the text I'd been reading became blurred. Grandma had found something she considered important enough that she continued to dig, heedless of the danger. Are you okay? Agatha hopped up onto my lap and purred loudly. Her furry body grounded me, and I ran my hand along her back. Not really, I said, wiping away a tear. If this is true, then this changes everything. It means that they didn't just die in an accident. Someone wanted them dead and gone. Shady dealings? Sounds like we've got some investigating to do, Agatha said, her fur bristling beneath my palm. Yeah, I suppose so, I said, anger hardening my resolve. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. No. It was about justice for my parents. I will do what I can to help, young witch. I appreciate that, Agatha, I said, feeling a bit of comfort in her words. I stood up, setting Grandma Leanne's journal aside on the desk. I should talk to Brad. He's someone I can trust, and I need someone I can share this with. Lead the way, Agatha said. She leapt down from the armchair and padded toward the attic stairs. Agatha and I descended into the heart of the house once more. The wooden steps sagged underfoot, each creaky step rumbling in the stillness. My thoughts were going non-stop, piecing together everything I had just learned. If dark sorcery was involved, then Corbin Grimm might be responsible for my parents' death. Do you think Brad will believe us? We reached the bottom of the stairs. That goes without saying, Agatha replied, flouncing ahead with her tail held high. He's always believed in you. You're right. I said it more to reassure myself than anything else. Chapter 4. Agatha and I moved through the house quickly, passing by the eclectic assembly of antiquated and modern furniture that decorated my living room. Outside, the sunlight was fading, emitting a golden hue on the wraparound porch. I pushed open the front door. The moment we took a step outside, a chilling sight stopped us in our tracks on the porch. 5 undead minions, their flesh rotting and eyes hollow, lumbered toward the house. Their appearance was grotesque. Patches of decaying skin clung to their bones, and a foul stench coated the air. They moved with unnerving purpose, their ghastly forms illuminated by the dying light of day. My body trembled. The undead minions shambled toward me and Agatha on the porch. The rotting flesh clung to their bones, emitting a foul stench that choked the air. Panic gripped me as I stumbled backward, my voice trembling with fear. "Holy hell!" I exclaimed, my brain trying to find a way out of this terrifying situation. Agatha hissed, her fur standing on end as she prepared for battle. From the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Brad sprinting out of his house next door. His face flushed with the heat of battle, his blue stare blazing with an unyielding resolve. "Sage! I'm here," he called out, jumping the short picket fence and sprinting toward me. Relief swept over me as Brad joined us on the porch. With a wave of his hand, the earth beneath the approaching minions trembled and shook. Rocks and dirt surged upwards, forming barriers that slowed their advance. Okay. We got this," I said, summoning my own magic to protect us. A glowing circle of protection formed around Brad, Agatha, and myself, pulsing with ethereal fire. Brad glanced at me, a small smile playing on his lips. "Ready when you are." "Let's give them hell," I shot back and got into a battle stance. A surge of supernatural power coursed through my veins as I faced the undead minions. Our spells swirled and intertwined in the air, creating a mesmerizing display of light and magic. With a flick of my wrist, I unleashed a barrage of magical projectiles at the minions. The air hissed with magic as my spells plowed into decaying flesh and bone. I moved with precision now, my movements fluid and calculated. Brad's magic complemented mine perfectly. He conjured golems made of earth and stone, their massive forms striking down the minions with powerful blows. The ground shook beneath our feet as Brad's golems fought alongside us. "Take that!" I yelled, a fierce joy bubbling up inside me with every new spell. "Nice moves," Brad called out, sweat dripping off his forehead. Agatha darted between us, tripping up the minions. "Thanks a million, but don't get distracted," I replied, dodging a swipe from a particularly persistent minion. "Wouldn't dream of it," he said, sending another burst of flames toward our enemies. Agatha darted between the minions, her shadowy form becoming a blur as she attacked with razor-sharp claws. Her magic swirled around her, enveloping the minions in shadowy fog and disorienting them. Tears welled up in my eyes as I fought hard. I couldn't help but think about my parents, of the injustice that had been done to them. I channeled my anger into my magic forces and kept fighting. Magic erupted from my hands, forming dazzling arcs of light that struck the undead minions. Each strike and spell imbued with raw emotion and supernatural intensity. I could feel my heart thumping hard in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We refused to back down, refusing to let Corbin's minions defeat us. "Hold your ground, we've got this," Brad reassured me, his voice even. "Right," I said, steeling myself. As one, we stood firm, pushing back against the tide of darkness. The bond between us felt almost tangible, a shared strength that bolstered our efforts. "Look out!" Brad yelled, wrenching me out of the way just as a minion lunged. "Close one," I said breathlessly, gratitude and something deeper swelling within me. "Always got your back," he replied, his gaze fastening onto mine for a brief, electrifying moment. "Same here," I whispered, focusing on the fight but unable to ignore the affection spreading through me. "Let's finish this," Brad urged, and with renewed vigor. We unleashed our combined power. I stood tall, feeling our magic intertwine, unstoppable and unyielding. Finally, the creatures were piles of bones and ash, scattered across the lawn. Sweat beaded my forehead. I caught my breath, my body trembling with exhaustion and triumph. Brad's expression shone with pride and concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, wiping away a trickle of sweat on my brow. "I'm fine. You?" "I'm good," he said. Agatha purred nearby, rubbing against my leg. The adrenaline began to subside. Brad's hand landed on my shoulder, his touch both comforting and electric. I turned to face him, my heart racing even faster, not just from the battle, but from his proximity. "Sage, that was incredible. You never cease to amaze me," Brad said, his voice low and sincere. Heat crept into my cheeks. "You weren't so bad yourself, mister," I teased, butterflies flapping in my stomach. Brad chuckled, his laughter warming me from the inside out. Well, I had a pretty great partner. Oh, stop, I said, friskily swatting his arm. You're going to make me blush. Too late, but anyway. I think it's cute when you blush, Brad said, stepping closer. I bit my lip, suddenly shy under his gaze. Brad, The next words caught in my throat. He took a step even closer, his hand reaching up to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. Sage, I've been wanting to tell you something for a while now. My breath hitched, my skin tingling where his fingers had brushed against it. What is it? I whispered. I care about you, Sage. So much, Brad confessed, his voice raw with emotion. You're not just my best friend, you're the one I want to be with. Through thick and thin, magic and mayhem. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I feel the same way. I care about you too. I just didn't know how to tell you. A grin spread across his face, his expression shining with happiness. Well, I'm glad we finally figured it out. Cupping my face in his hands, he kissed me. His lips soft and warm, molding perfectly against mine. I melted into his embrace, my arms winding around his neck as I deepened the kiss. Now that I finally had him, I was determined not to let him go. Chapter 5. I flopped onto the mismatched throw pillows that had been thrown over my green couch, the heart of my comfy living room. Sunlight filtered in through the sheer curtains, dappling light across the hardwood floors and rugs. I'd always loved this room, with its blues and greens reminiscent of a tranquil sea cove, bookshelves stuffed to the brim with magical lore and family memories. Agatha, not on the table, I chided as my familiar made herself comfortable amid a scatter of papers. She shot me an unbothered look before curling up on a nearby cushion, her yellow eyes slipping shut. That cat's sass never failed to amuse me. Evie lounged in the armchair, her hazel stare sharp under jet-black bangs. Brad leaned against the stone fireplace, his casual poise belying the tension in his broad shoulders. I studied him, appreciating how he filled out that green shirt. Down girl, I scolded myself, forcing my thoughts back to the present. Okay, so I talked to the High Witch the other day, I said, twisting a blue highlighted lock around my finger. I'm only to keep tabs on Councilman Voss, no digging deeper into whatever else is going on. The words tasted like ash in my mouth because I yearned to do more than just watch him. That man was shadier than a weeping willow on the solstice. If something big was brewing, I wanted to get ahead of it. Not wait for the world to come tumbling down around my ears. Brad frowned. Seriously? That's like asking a storm not to break. I smiled. I know, right? Brad had always known how to voice my feelings, even when I couldn't. He read me so well. Which was probably why we clicked so well, even after all these years apart. Evie sighed. Sounds about as fun as watching paint dry. I agree, Agatha murmured from her spot, her voice dripping with sarcasm without opening her eyes. All the excitement is making me tired. I stared at Agatha in wonder. That cat could outsnark a bridge troll. Look, we've got to do something, I said, slamming my fist onto my open palm. My parents didn't raise me to stand idly by while the world went to hell. If I could stop a disaster before it began, their spirits would rest peacefully. Brad's expression looked serious and resolved. Secret investigation, then? Under the radar. But if we get caught? Evie sat back and crossed her legs. You'll end up in jail, Agatha drawled, and what a pity that would be, because napping through a council meeting while doing surveillance is precisely how I envisioned my day. Brad paced the room. We can't let anyone else find out what we're doing. If Corbin, Ingrid, or even Councilman Voss catches wind of our investigation, we could all be in real danger. I watched Brad pace, his protective streak showing. He'd always looked after the people he cared about, even when we were just kids playing hide and seek. Which means we have to be extra careful, I replied, resolve firming my voice. Holy hell, I didn't learn 7th level magic for nothing. I'm ready to fight. All right. I'm in, Evie said, standing up and brushing off her jeans. But now I need to head to work before my boss turns me into a toad for being late again. I couldn't help but laugh. Have a good day, Evie. I gave her a quick hug and she returned it with a squeeze. "Stay safe, you too," she said, giving me a faint smile before heading out the door. "I'm in need of a long nap." Agatha yawned, stretching her limbs. "I'll be in your bedroom if anyone needs me. But please, try not to need me." With that, she sauntered off, leaving Brad and I alone in the living room. "Don't worry about me, Mr. Protective," I said in a teasing tone, because Brad's concern was endearing. "I can handle myself." While I appreciated Brad, I didn't want him to see me as some weak damsel in distress. After everything we'd been through, he knew I could take care of myself. Still, it was nice to know he cared. Brad sat down beside me. "Oh, I have no doubt about that," he said with a smile. "But it doesn't hurt to have someone looking out for you." Heat bloomed in my cheeks. "Is that your way of saying you want to be my knight in shining armor?" I teased, raising an eyebrow. "More like your partner in crime," he shot back, grinning. That smile could light up a room. Brad had always known how to make me laugh, even in serious situations. It was one of the best things I liked about him. "Better watch out, or I'll start calling you Robin Hood." He chuckled, the sound sexy and deep. "Hey, someone's got to keep an eye on the merry band of witches." Could he be any more charming? I mentally rolled my eyes at myself. Get it together, Sage. Especially when the leader has a penchant for getting into trouble, I admitted, feeling a warmth in my chest at his concern. It reminded me of old times. "Exactly," he said, his voice softer now. "I care about you, Sage." His hand found mine, and the touch was gentle yet electrifying. Butterflies erupted in my stomach as my heart fluttered. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? A smile jerked at my lips, unbidden. "You're not alone in this, Sage," he whispered earnestly, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. Alone. The word resonated deep within me, stirring up memories of everything I'd lost. My family. My happy home. But with Brad here, that ache didn't feel quite as sharp. "Well, it's nice to know that I'm not flying solo," I replied, squeezing back. My thumb grazed his skin, heat vibrating in the air between us. Brad's eyes lit up suddenly. "Remember that time we tried to create an invisibility spell in high school? How could I forget? We ended up turning Mrs. Thornton's cat invisible instead." I laughed, flooded with nostalgia. Holy hell, that was a mess. Those carefree days seemed so far away now, but reminiscing with Brad made my life brighter. We really had been two troublemaking kids back then. "Yeah, but we got through it together," he said, tracing circles on my hand. "Just like we'll get through this." We'd always made a great team, even when we messed up. With Brad as my friend and supporter, I could handle anything. "And while we're on the subject of getting through things," Brad said, his expression thoughtful, "do you remember our first date?" "Please don't remind me." I groaned in exaggeration, then laughed. "The one where you accidentally reconstructed the table and chairs in that cafe." "Hey, I was trying to impress you with my magical skills," he defended, laughing along with me. I shook my head, amused by the memory. Only Brad could turn a romantic dinner into a construction zone. That night had shown me his heart was in the right place, even if his magic was a bit unpredictable back then. "Well, you certainly left an impression," I joked. "At least it wasn't as bad as that time I took you to the haunted house, and you screamed so loudly you scared the ghosts away." I shook my head. "We've had our fair share of awkward moments, haven't we?" "Yeah, and they're all part of what makes us, us," Brad said, his expression softening. "And I wouldn't trade any of those memories for anything." I felt a pang of something in my chest. Our shared history ran deep, full of magic, friendship, and mistakes. And through everything, we'd always been there for each other. "Neither would I said. "You know, Brad, you're a pretty amazing guy." "Right back at you, Miss Holland," he replied, leaning in a little. "For a girl who scares ghosts, you're pretty incredible yourself." My pulse quickened with him so close. There was a connection between us that time and distance couldn't sever. Still, was going down that road again wise? "That's so sweet, Brad," I said softly, my emotions a jumbled mess. Did you date much after us? He asked. A bit. And you? Yeah, and it was a disaster. Brad chuckled, shaking his head. Oh man, I dated this one girl during my sophomore year who had this pet ferret and was obsessed with interpretive dance. Well, on our third date, she decided it would be romantic to bring her ferret along to the restaurant. Long story short, the little weasel escaped and caused absolute chaos. I spent half the night chasing it through the kitchen while she sobbed into her spaghetti. I couldn't help but laugh at their misfortune. Okay, that's pretty bad. But have I ever told you about the guy I first went out with who collected taxidermy? Brad's eyes widened. No way. This I gotta hear. While I launched into the story, I marveled at how comfortable I was sharing my dating disasters with Brad. He always managed to find the humor in even my most cringeworthy moments. He invited me over to his place for dinner, and I kid you not, every inch of his apartment was covered in stuffed animals. And not the cute, cuddly kind. I'm talking full-on mounted deer heads and glass-eyed squirrels. I've never been so creeped out in my life. Yikes. That's a whole new level of weird. Brad shuddered. I guess we both have a talent for attracting the eccentric types, huh? Seems that way, I said, grinning. Bonding with Brad over our shared history of romantic misadventures filled me with a pleasant warmth, like sipping hot cocoa on a chilly day. But you know, even with all the craziness, I wouldn't trade those experiences either. They taught me what I want and don't want in a relationship. Brad nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. Same here. Every mistake, every awkward moment. All lessons learnt, I hope. His easygoing wisdom never failed to soothe my soul. You're right, I said softly. And I'm glad we can share these stories with each other. It's nice to have someone who understands, you know? Having Brad back in my life, being able to bare my true self to him without fear of judgment, felt like rediscovering a missing piece of myself. A piece I hadn't even realized I'd lost. Definitely. Brad's gaze met mine. There's no one else I'd rather reminisce with, Sage. No one gets me quite like you do. My heart galloped like a racehorse. The friendship between us was as strong as ever, but I was hoping for more. I'm glad you moved back home, Brad said, his voice low and husky. His blue eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment the world outside my living room ceased to exist. Brad. I whispered. Yeah, he asked, inching closer. I couldn't help noticing how his gaze flicked down to my lips. My breath stalled, and an electric current ran through me. Nothing, I whispered, my voice was barely audible now. His smirk returned. You sure about that? Maybe not, I admitted, feeling my cheeks warm. Our faces were mere inches apart now. Every time I'm near you, all I want to do is kiss you, Sage, he murmured, his breath merging with mine. I inhaled sharply, my pulse quickening. Brad's confession confirmed my own hidden desires, feelings I'd barely admitted to myself until now. After so many years apart, so many missed chances, were we finally on the verge of something more? Trembling, I met his intense gaze, pulse thrumming in anticipation of what might come next. Slowly, deliberately, Brad closed the gap. His lips touched mine, tentatively at first, then more insistent. It was as if a dam had burst, releasing a flood of pent-up emotions and desires. The kiss became fiery and all-consuming, overflowing with a passion that had been simmering between us for too long. All doubts and worries melted away. There was no Councilman Voss to worry about here. No High Witch's warning, no looming danger. Just Brad and me, lost in each other. My body reeled, drunk on the taste of his lips, the heat of his touch. How long had I yearned for this closeness? And now that it was happening, it exceeded every fantasy. When we finally pulled apart, breathing hard, I searched his face for any sign of regret. Instead, I found only affection. Wow, was all I could manage, still dazed from the intensity of our kiss. My lips tingled, my heart pounded. I wanted nothing more than to kiss him again and again. Yeah, wow, he said, his grin widening. You're a really good kisser. I smiled, still reeling from the intensity of our kiss. You too. An understatement, really. Kissing Brad left me electrified in the best possible way. Glad you think so, he replied, sitting back. So, tell me about your latest design project. Anything exciting? His casual tone surprised me. Could we really go back to chatting normally after a kiss like that? I took a steadying breath, trying to gather my scattered thoughts. Actually, yeah, I said, letting my emotions settle. I just got hired to work on an interior for the new library annex. Enchanted bookshelves, self-lighting reading nooks, the works. Sounds incredible, he said, genuine admiration in his voice. Your creativity never ceases to amaze me. I couldn't help but be warmed by his praise. What about you? Any new architectural marvels in the making? I asked, falling back into our friendly rapport. Funny you should ask. I've been experimenting with creating golems for construction work. They can handle heavy lifting and intricate details, which frees me up to focus on the finer aspects of design. That's brilliant, I said, genuinely impressed. You've always had a knack for blending magic and architecture. Brad grinned. Coming from you, that means a lot. You know, we've both come a long way since high school. Yeah, I said, smiling as memories flooded through me. We really have. Though how he made me feel hadn't changed at all. Do you ever wonder what it'd be like if we tried again? He asked, his tone serious now. Properly. Sometimes, I admitted, meeting his gaze. His eyes searched mine, and in them I saw a future I'd only allowed myself to imagine in my most vulnerable moments. A future by his side. Chapter 6. The brick-paved walkways of the Institute for the Arcane Arts resonated beneath my boots as I made my way to Ingrid's office. The castle-like structure loomed ahead, its gray stone walls softened by climbing ivy and vibrant bursts of flowering vines. Students bustled around me, their robes whispering on the ground as they passed. It was a strange feeling, really, to be back on the grounds of my university that for so long was home for me. Now, I was a past student and the High Witch's assistant. I used to look up to the graduating class as wise and old witches. Now, I was even older than those seniors I used to look up to. I reached the grand oak door of Ingrid's office and stopped. The brass nameplate gleamed and her name, Ingrid Nightspire, High Witch, was inscribed. My hand trembled as I knocked. Come in, her voice commanded from within. I entered the room, immediately struck by its opulence. The air smelled faintly of incense and old books. A crystal chandelier radiated shimmering light across the room. Ingrid sat behind a massive desk, her high back chair giving her an almost regal persona. Hello, High Witch, I greeted her, trying to keep my voice steady. Ingrid looked up, her violet stare boring into me. Her long silver hair flowed down her back, complementing her elegant gown that was adorned with delicate silvery embroidery. Ah, Sage, she said with a small smile on her lips. Do sit. I took a seat across from her desk in a hard and uncomfortable chair. Perhaps she didn't want any of her guests to stay for any length of time. Ingrid's office had always felt otherworldly, like stepping into another realm. It was both intimidating and awe-inspiring. Perhaps that was the point. Was the decor designed to intimidate visitors on purpose, or did Ingrid just have peculiar taste? Volumes of arcane knowledge lined the bookshelves of one wall. I pondered, not for the first time, what it would be like to possess even a fraction of Ingrid's power and wisdom. To command that kind of respect, to shape the very fabric of the magical world. But who was I kidding? I would never be like her. I was just Sage, fumbling my way through this witchy business with no one to guide me except the teachers that were taught to help. Thank you for coming, Ingrid said. I wanted to express my gratitude for installing the surveillance enchantments at Councilman Voss's house. It's given us invaluable insights. Discomfort prickled at my conscience like a persistent thorn. Sure, I wanted to prove myself to Ingrid, to show her that I was a valuable asset. But at what cost? Invading someone's privacy, even if they were a shady councilman, felt wrong on a fundamental level. I bit my lip, trying to summon the courage to voice my concerns more firmly. Ah, you're welcome, I replied hesitantly, shifting in my seat. but I'm not entirely comfortable with spying on him. I hoped voicing my unease might make Ingrid reconsider, but I knew better than to hold my breath. Your discomfort is noted, but it is necessary for my work. Ingrid waved a hand dismissively as if clearing away an annoying fly. I hesitated a moment, then blurted out, I know you're busy, High Witch, but I wonder if Corbin Grimm or Councilman Voss might be linked to my parents' deaths. The words tumbled out before I could think of a better way to phrase them. They were, in fact, a desperate plea for answers to the questions that had haunted me for years. Deep down, I knew this was a long shot. But I still clung to the hope that Ingrid, with all her power and influence, might be able to uncover something I'd missed. Some clue that would finally bring me closure, allow me to make peace with the gaping hole my parents' absence had left in my life. Ingrid's expression didn't change. I doubt it, Sage. They were tragic accidents. Furthermore, I have more pressing council matters to attend to. Her indifference stung, but I tried not to show it. Like what? What's so urgent? Curiosity burned in my veins, with a touch of indignation. How could anything be more pressing than getting to the bottom of my parents' deaths? They may have been mere humans, but they were my world. Didn't that count for something? High-level council decisions, negotiations, Ingrid said, her tone turning distant. Matters too complex to delve into now. Aha, I murmured, feeling my stomach twist with anger and a healthy dose of disappointment. Of course. I was just a lowly apprentice, not privy to the inner workings of the council. Still, a part of me bristled at being brushed off so easily. I may not have Ingrid's experience or power, but I wasn't a child. I had a right to know what was going on, especially if it could impact the people I cared about. Focus on your work, Sage. Ingrid's voice was sharp and authoritative now. Leave the bigger picture to those of us equipped to handle it. My jaw tightened at her being so dismissive of me. Wasn't I the one that had dealt with an evil entity terrorizing my town only weeks ago? But I managed to force a smile to my face and said, "Sure thing." As much as I respected Ingrid, moments like these made me question her priorities. Was maintaining the status quo more important than seeking justice for those who had been wronged? Than protecting the innocent from harm? Is there anything else? She asked, already turning her attention to a stack of parchments on her desk. No, that's all, I said, standing up. So glad I made the trip. I'll see myself out. Farewell, Sage, she said without looking up. Goodbye, High Witch, I replied, closing the door behind me. I walked back through the winding corridors of the academy, my thoughts a whirl of unanswered questions and nagging doubts. Ingrid may have dismissed my concerns, but I knew in my gut that there was more to the story. One way or another, I'd get to the bottom of the mystery surrounding my parents' untimely deaths, even if I had to do it on my own. I stepped out into the courtyard and 0.0.n, chased sunlight warm against my skin. Ingrid's dismissal really troubled me, a persistent itch that WOU0XL 0.0000 didn't go away. Focus on your work, the High Witch had said, as if surveillance enchantments were the be-all and end-all of our world's problems. I needed answers, not more bureaucracy. I paused under the sprawling branches of a towering oak tree and took out my cell phone. Brad would be more supportive. He always was. I dialed his number, tapping my foot impatiently as I waited for him to pick up. Hey Sage, Brad answered, his voice crackling through the receiver. What's up? Can you meet me at the college? I need your insight into something. Sure thing. Be there in 10. During my years at the Arcane Arts Academy, my friends had become my family. Now, I wasn't sure how I felt about any of those memories anymore. Could I trust myself to remember the full extent of camaraderie and help I'd received from my professors and my friends? Or was it all a lie wrapped up in the emotional torment surrounding my grief? Hey, there you are. Brad called out to me and jerked me back to reality. He approached with a casual stride, his gelled spiky hair catching the light. What's going on? Thanks for coming. I stood up, brushing off imaginary dust from my skirt. I want to talk to Professor Rowan Elderwood. I think he might have some answers. Never heard of him, Brad said, raising an eyebrow in question. Well, he's an expert in necromancy symbols and obscure runes. We need someone who knows about that sort of stuff. Brad shrugged. All right. Let's go see him. We walked through the campus side by side. Memories flooded my mind, late-night study sessions, the thrill of mastering a new spell, the support of fellow students through those hard times. Yet now, those memories felt distant, overshadowed by the looming questions about my parents' deaths and Councilman Voss's potential involvement. When we reached Professor Elderwood's classroom, the door was ajar. I knocked gently before pushing it open. The professor sat alone at his desk, surrounded by stacks of magical books and flickering candles. His short auburn hair was neatly combed, and he wore a tailored suit. Professor Elderwood, I asked gently, trying not to startle him as I stepped inside. I'm Sage Holland, and this is Brad Adams. Could we talk to you? If you have a moment, please. Nice to meet you, Miss Holland, Mr. Adams, Rowan greeted us, not getting up from his desk. His gray eyes were sharp and inquisitive. How can I be of service today? The classroom was as incredible as I'd imagined, full of magical artifacts and dusty scrolls. The air hummed with latent, unharnessed power, a verification of the magic contained within the walls. My belly twisted with nerves as I stepped further into Professor Elderwood's domain. The amount of the magical knowledge surrounding me was both exhilarating and intimidating. Professor Elderwood, I started, choosing my words carefully, I've come across some necromancy symbols and malevolent runes in a client's house. I need to understand them better. Necromantic symbols, you say? Rowan's face lit up with interest. Quite the complex subject. You see, necromancy has been both revered and reviled throughout history, often misunderstood by those who lack the proper context. These symbols, if they are necromantic in nature, could signify any number of things. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Leave it to Professor Elderwood to turn a simple question into a long-winded lecture. I appreciated his knowledge, but sometimes a girl just needed the Cliff Notes version. Professor, I interrupted gently, could we chat specifically about the practical applications? What do these symbols mean in today's context? Ah yes, Rowan said, adjusting his glasses. In today's context, such symbols could indicate a binding spell, a summoning ritual, or even a protective ward, depending on their arrangement and the intent behind their placement. Well, that narrowed it down to pretty much everything. I suppressed a sigh. This was going to be a long day. I'm so thankful for your assistance, I said, trying to keep my impatience in check. That's helpful. What else can you tell us? Professor Elderwood leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. The necromantic arts are not to be trifled with, Miss Holland. In the wrong hands, they can unleash unspeakable horrors upon the world. I tried not to let the grimace behind my smile show. I knew that, of course, but hearing the professor voice my fears made it all the more real. The thought of facing down a horde of undead was not exactly how I'd planned to spend my weekend. But hey, at least it would make for a great story. Is there any way to counter these symbols? To neutralize their power? Brad asked. Countering necromancy requires a delicate touch and a deep understanding of the forces at play. Professor Elderwood finally stood up and came around from his desk. I thought he might come over to where we were, near the students' desks, but instead he began pacing the room, his robe swishing around his ankles. One must fight darkness with light, death with life. It's a precarious balance, and not one for the young or inexperienced to attempt. I nodded, trying to absorb his vague advice. Why did warlocks always have to be so damn cryptic? Would it kill them to give me a straight answer for once? I tilted my head. I don't suppose you could give me a crash course in anti-necromancy spells? Professor Elderwood chuckled dryly. If only it were that simple, Miss Holland. Anti-necromancy, you see, is not just a branch of magic, but an entire discipline on its own, steeped in ancient lore and fraught with peril at every turn. The The roots of necromancy stretch back to the dawn of magic itself, entwined with the very essence of life and death. To counter it, one must understand not just the spells, but the very nature of the magic that animates the dead, the rituals that bind spirits to the corporeal plane, and the malevolent energies that sustain such abhorrent practices. Well, that was a mouthful. I tried to absorb the professor's info, but my thoughts kept wandering. Necromancy, archaic lore, peril at every turn, it sounded like a recipe for disaster. Or at least a really bad hangover. Was I in over my head? Oh, Brad said dryly. You don't say. The professor paused, his expression gleaming with a blend of wisdom and nostalgia. The ancient texts speak of long-forgotten wards and sigils, incantations uttered in the old tongue, and potions brewed under the light of a waning moon. Each element, each symbol, carries a credence of significance, a resonance with the forces we seek to repel. It is not merely a matter of casting a spell. Oh no, it is a delicate balancing act between light and shadow, life and death. The professor droned on, and I kept nodding along, pretending to understand every word. But I was barely keeping up. Ward sigils, old tongue? It sounded like a foreign language to me. I glanced at Brad, but he seemed just as lost as I was. So much for that crash course. Okay, Professor Elderwood, I said, cutting through his monologue. I appreciate the confidence boost, but could you possibly point me to a beginner's guide or something? I'm going to need some serious hand-holding here. Professor Elderwood wandered back to his desk, then leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled thoughtfully. To embark on this path, you must first immerse yourself in the study of necromantic principles, understand the workings of the soul, the binding of spirit to flesh, the forbidden rites that draw power from the nether realms. Only then can you hope to unravel the intricacies of countering such dark arts. It requires patience, diligence, and a staunch will. But above all, it demands an unyielding sense of purpose, a clarity of intent that can pierce through the gloom of necromantic corruption. He sighed deeply, his expression softening. I have faith in you, Miss Holland. You are a resourceful young witch, with a mind both sharp and inquisitive. Though I cannot walk this path for you, I can offer you guidance and the wisdom of those who have walked it before. Trust in your abilities, seek knowledge with an open heart, and remember that the true strength of a witch or warlock lies not in the power of the spells, but in the purity of intent and the resilience of spirit. Great. Thanks. A pep talk was the last thing I needed right now. I had a client waiting and a potential undead uprising to prevent. But I couldn't deny the small flutter of something akin to pride in my chest. It was nice to know someone believed in me, even if that someone was a long-winded, cryptic warlock. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Professor. Is there anything you can give me to take home, or? I let my voice drift, hoping he'd get the hint. The professor's brow furrowed, then he pulled open the drawer on his desk, pulled out a large book, and held it up. Take this. I can't loan you anything of the college's, but this is one of my own books. It might help to nudge you in the right direction. I hurried over to take the book from him. Thank you so much. I took the book and slid into my satchel, which I'd case a spell upon to hold a mountain of things. Not unsimilar to a Mary Poppins type bag. I walked back over to Brad and grinned at him. At least this trip hadn't been fruitless. Shall we go? Brad nodded. Yeah, let's do it. You kids, be careful. The forces you're dealing with are not to be underestimated. If you find yourself in over your head, don't hesitate to ask for help, Professor Elderwood called out. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. I'll keep that in mind. Always happy to assist young minds eager to learn, the professor replied with a nod. But remember, kids, knowledge is a double-edged sword. Use it wisely. Of course, Professor, I said, smiling back at him. Now, if there's nothing else, the professor trailed off, already turning back to his books. That's all for now, I said, exchanging a glance with Brad. I'm indebted to you, Professor. Anytime, he replied, his attention already on his studies. Brad and I stepped out into the hallway. That was something, Brad said, shaking his head as though he was as perplexed as I was. Chapter 7. We walked away from Professor Elderwood's classroom, a laugh bubbling in my throat. Yeah, tell me about it. He's got a lot of knowledge, but holy hell, he sure loves to hear himself talk. Guess it's part of the package deal with being a professor, Brad joked. They have to talk all day to students who barely respond. It would be hard to teach if you didn't like the sound of your own voice. True, I said, grinning at him. Brad nudged my shoulder gently as we continued to walk through the campus. So, what do you think about Corbin Grimm? Think he's really involved in some sort of supernatural uprising? Honestly, I'm not sure if he's the mastermind or just a lackey, I said, frowning. It feels like every bit of information we find just leads to more questions and more information. It's a veritable maze, and I'm not sure which way to turn, to be honest. But if there's a chance he's involved, we need to find out. He was a bad guy. Every instinct I owned told me it was true. We just had to prove it. I agree, Brad said, his tone serious for once. I smiled at him, grateful for his support. We'd stepped out of the buildings on campus and began heading towards town. We walked in silence, the mid-afternoon sun filtering through the trees and forming dappled shadows on the path. It was peaceful, almost like old times when we were kids, before magic and tragedy complicated everything. I had to get home and get working, and yet I was loath to interrupt what was happening between us. Remember when we used to race each other home from high school? Brad asked suddenly, breaking the silence. I laughed, remembering it well. You always cheated by using your magic to trip me up. Not that he'd ever let me get hurt, but it had certainly slowed me down. Hey, I prefer to call it a strategic use of resources, Sage, he said, grinning. I shoved his arm. Strategic, my ass. You were just scared I'd beat you fair and square. Maybe. Brad took my hand in his. The heat of his touch sent a tingle of heat down my spine, and I squeezed his hand back. But seriously, Sage, I miss this. Us. Just hanging out together. Me too, I said softly, glancing up at him. Yeah, he said, squeezing my hand again. I've been thinking about us a lot. And I think maybe we should try dating. Take things slow. I couldn't help the grin that tilted my lips, eagerness and nerves flooding through me. Okay. He stopped in his tracks and turned to look at me. I care about you, Sage. And I always have, always will. He leaned in slowly and I lifted my chin to meet him halfway. He pressed his lips to mine in a kiss that was soft at first, tentative. But quickly the feelings between us grew more passionate as we lost ourselves in the sensation. I dropped his hand and stepped closer, wrapping my arms around his neck so that I could feel the heat between us intensify. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. Guess we should get going, I said reluctantly, glancing at the afternoon sun. You've got work, right? Yeah, he said, sighing. Duty calls. But we'll pick this up later, okay? I couldn't help but grin and nod, then went up on my toes to give him one last quick kiss. Yep. We were still a few hours' walk from home, or an hour's drive broomstick ride. So Brad gathered me close. Hold on. I'll transport us home. I wasn't as good at these types of spells, so I tucked my head in under his chin and closed my eyes as the tingle of magic coursed over my body. So, I'll see you later? He repeated, stepping back. I swayed toward him as I opened my eyes and reoriented myself. Oh yeah. Thanks for that. He gave me a wink before heading off toward his house. I watched him go, a jumble of emotions twisting inside me. Part of me wanted to follow him, to curl up in his lap on the couch and pretend the rest of the world didn't exist. But it did, and I had a shit ton of responsibilities to deal with. I sighed heavily, then walked up the path and into my own house. The feel of his warm kiss still lingered on my lips, and I pressed them together, memorizing the taste. My living room was dim, which was unusual, and the curtains were drawn. I flicked on the light and jumped. High Witch. What are you doing here? Ingrid Nightspire, the High Witch herself, was seated on my couch like a queen in exile. Good evening, Sage. Something has come to my attention, and we need to talk. Her tone carried the burden of authority, and an unsettling amount of calm. Oh boy, this can't be good. When the High Witch herself makes a house call, you know it's serious business. I braced myself for whatever bombshell she was about to drop. About what? My parents? The supernatural uprising? I walked into my living room and sat down on the large armchair, grabbing the plush purple pillow for comfort. About Bradley Adams, she answered. The air had thickened around us. Brad? Why would she want to talk about him? Last I checked, dating wasn't a crime in the magical world. The High Witch must have seen me and Brad on campus earlier together, and just now making out in front of the house. A hot flush burned my neck and face. I frowned at her, ready to ask her what she meant, but I didn't get a chance. She continued. You cannot see him any longer. There's a primeval rule, the Covenant of Veiled Boundaries, that strictly forbids any romantic entanglements between members of the Council's inner circle, like yourself, and civilians like Brad. This rule is not just a mere guideline, it is a binding mandate that prevents conflicts of interest and ensures the integrity of our duties. Well, smack me with a broomstick. Apparently, falling for a cute warlock was against some musty old covenant I'd never even heard of. Talk about a buzzkill. I've never heard of the Covenant of Veiled Boundaries. I frowned, feeling a twinge of rebellion rise within me. She couldn't possibly think that me dating Brad Adams was going to be a problem. Brad is a good man. And we're not children, Ingrid. We don't need babysitting. Ingrid's stare bored into mine, her expression unyielding. The Covenant of Veiled Boundaries was established centuries ago, after a disastrous incident where personal relationships compromised the Council's ability to make impartial decisions. The consequences were catastrophic, endangering not only the Council, but the entire magical community. To prevent such a calamity from ever occurring again, this rule was put in place. I slumped in the armchair. So, because of some stupid rule, I have to choose between my duty and my heart? Well, wasn't this just a regular old Shakespearean tragedy? Torn between love and loyalty, with no easy answers in sight. I half expected a droll voice to say, to be or not to be, in the background. Ingrid didn't show any signs of empathy. Instead, she stuck her nose further in the air. I understand that this is difficult for you, Sage. But as a member of the Council's inner circle, your responsibilities extend beyond personal desires. Your actions must reflect the greater good, the protection and balance of our world. Any personal attachments to civilians could cloud your judgment, lead to divided loyalties, and ultimately put everyone at risk. Is there really no other way? I asked, my voice tinged with desperation this time. Rules are not about what we need, they are about order. Ingrid's expression remained impassive, but there was an edge to her voice now. The Council cannot risk distractions or divided loyalties. It is for the greater good. I huffed. Seems more like control to me. Why does it matter who I date? Seriously, since when did my love life become Council business? What's next, a magical chastity belt? I couldn't believe Ingrid was pulling the greater good card on me. Because emotions cloud judgment, she countered with a dismissive wave of her hand. The Covenant of Veiled Boundaries is a necessary safeguard, ensuring that our work remains untainted by personal biases. I trust you understand the gravity of this situation and will make the right choice. Is a fling worth that risk? Was she serious right now? Brad was the only guy I'd ever wanted. Only guy I'd ever felt this way about. It's not just a fling. My frustration was boiling over. And since when do you care so much about rules? You bend them when it suits you. Hypocrite much? I'd seen Ingrid play fast and loose with the rules plenty of times before. But apparently my budding romance was where she drew the line. Watch your tone, Sage. I am still your superior. Her voice was as sharp as glass, and it cut. This isn't about me. It's about maintaining the balance we've worked for centuries to uphold. Balance that stifles us, you mean? My hands formed fists at my sides. Look, I respect you, Ingrid, more than anyone. But I refused to let archaic rules dictate my personal life, especially when they were ridiculous. Brad had been an integral key in me defeating Tenebris, and Ingrid knew that. Who would I go to for help if not Brad? Your refusal is noted, but disobedience has consequences, she said as stood up from couch, her height and poise exuding dominance. Consider this a warning. Are you seriously threatening me? I asked, jumping to my feet also. Ingrid's gaze narrowed. Merely stating facts. For your sake, I hope you make the right choice. With that, she swept out of the room, leaving me standing alone. A tornado of thoughts whirling through my head. I sank onto the sofa. How could something that felt so right be against the rules? This made no sense at all. Agatha walked into the room and jumped up onto my lap, a rare show of affection from her. There you are, I said, scratching behind her ears and swallowing hard, a lump forming in my throat. I'd wondered where you were hiding. Agatha shuddered, her fur prickling over her back. The High Witch dismissed me from the lower level. I had no choice, but I did manage to hear most of what was said. I'm sorry, young witch. Her tones and care made hot tears spring to my eyes. Damn it, Agatha, I mumbled. Why does it always have to be so complicated? Chapter 8. I closed the front door of my client's home behind me, a sense of accomplishment gripping my insides. I'd done a good job, and he was happy. Then I caught sight of him, Corbin Grimm, and my breath stuck in my throat. His presence, like a shadow at high noon, had no place here in Emberwick Crossing. He leaned against a gas-lit lamppost, his shoulder-length dark hair framing a cold face that looked as though it were chiseled from stone. Corbin wore a black trench coat that fell to his knees, its collar turned up against the wind, and beneath it, layers of black clothing that seemed to absorb the light around him. Miss Holland, he called out, his voice tinged with malice. I suppressed a shudder. Fantastic. Just what I needed. A chat with tall, dark, and necromantic. Corbin. What brings you out from under your rock? I tried to keep my voice steady as I glanced around, but we were alone. The street was eerily quiet, the usual resident noises strangely absent. His lips twisted into a semblance of a smile, but it was more a sneer. You're meddling, actually. Cease your interference, or you'll find yourself in a grave of your own making. Oh, goody. Death threats before dinner. And here I thought my social calendar was empty. Seriously, Corbin? I'm not afraid of you. I was lying, of course. My heart stuttered in my chest, blood rushing around my body at a frantic pace. The air around us grew colder, a chill seeping into my bones. Note to self, invest in a thicker jacket. Preferably one enchanted against creepy warlocks. Perhaps you should be. His voice was like ice. He pushed off the lamppost and took a step toward me, his movements smooth and predatory. You've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, Sage. Playing with forces you barely understand. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. He wasn't the one trying to juggle a magical uprising and a coffee addiction. I'm just doing my job, Corbin. Protecting people from monsters like you. His laugh was a low, sinister chuckle that sent a fresh wave of fear through me. You think you know what monsters are, little witch? You have no idea. He raised a hand, and the darkness around him seemed to coalesce, shadowy tendrils curling through the air like smoke. You see, Sage, I'm not just any monster. I'm a force of nature. I can bend death to my will, command the spirits of the damned. And you're just a girl with a few parlor tricks. Well, excuse me for not having a PhD in creepy magic 101. Some of us had lives. Or at least, attempted to. Back off, Corbin, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound brave. I'm warning you. Oh, I'm shaking in my size 12 boots, he mocked, his eyes glowing green with malevolent glee. Do you really think you can stand against me? I've toppled covens, brought entire cities to their knees. What makes you think you can stop me? Before I could respond, a sudden voice cut through the tension. Holy hell, Corbin, do you ever shut up? Agatha's voice had a sharp, sardonic tone. Corbin's gaze flicked to the black cat balanced on a nearby fence. Ah, the familiar. How quaint. Tell me, Sage, do you truly believe that a talking cat can protect you? Agatha's fur bristled and she hissed. I've seen more in my 9 lives than you'll ever know, necromancer. Try anything and you'll regret it. Corbin's smile widened, his white teeth flashing in the artificially fading light. He took a step back, the shadows following him like a cloak. We'll see about that. Cross me again, and the next time we meet, it won't be a warning. The necromancer turned on his heel and melted into the darkness. The sunshine returned as though someone had flipped on a switch, but my limbs shook as though cold. Well, wasn't that just a delightful interlude? I made a mental note to add avoid creepy warlocks to my to-do list. Right after buy more coffee and save the world. Agatha jumped down from the fence and rubbed against my leg. You okay, young witch? Yeah, Agatha. Thanks for the help. I took a shuddering breath and aimed for humor. Just another day in the life, right? She let out a hiss. Right. Just another day with death threats from a creepy necromancer. I managed a weak smile. Let's get out of here. Agatha's tail flicked with irritation as we started our walk home. The afternoon air was crisp, carrying the fragrance of pine and earth after the light rain. A family of raccoons scurried across our path, their masked faces gorgeous in the weirdest way. We took a detour to Councilman Voss's house. I still had the kitchen remodel to finish. We let ourselves into the house, and Agatha waited while I did the magical redesign. I traced a spell over the granite countertops and made them look as good as new again. When I'd finished, I glanced about to check no one else had arrived home. Let's check out the office before we go, I said, my breath hitching in my throat belying my unease. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, shining on the mahogany furnishings. The smell of wood and lemon polish tickled my senses. In the corner stood a large filing cabinet with metal drawers. I carefully yanked open one of the lower drawers and began rifling through the files. My brow furrowed in concentration. After a few moments, I spotted a thick manila folder and opened it to find incriminating evidence against Councilman Voss, including photos and documents linking him to Corbin's necromancy. Agatha leaned in close, her whiskers twitching. Jackpot. This was just the break in the case I needed. Mom and Dad, if you're watching, I hope I'm making you proud. Your little girl's turning into a regular Nancy Drew, meets Hermione Granger. Holy hell, it looks like Corbin has been blackmailing Councilman Voss to help him, I said. My fingers lingered over the papers inside, revealing the undeniable truth. Damn it, Voss, I murmured, scanning the documents. What have you done? I shook my head. And here I thought politicians were supposed to be the ones doing the blackmailing, not the other way around. Guess power and corruption go hand in hand, whether you're casting votes or casting spells. Complicated things, that's what, Agatha said, her voice low and tense. Is someone there? A maid's voice floated toward us, timid yet inquisitive. Uh-oh. Busted by the cleaning crew. I'd rather tangle with a demon than try to explain this compromising position. Think fast, Sage. Shadow manipulation now, I whispered to Agatha. She blended us both into the dimness with her magic. I froze, holding my breath as the maid peered in, then moved on none the wiser. Phew. Nothing like a familiar who can pull a disappearing act. Close call, Agatha said, materializing beside me. Let's get out before we push our luck too far. Right behind you, I replied, slipping the incriminating file into my bag. Time to skedaddle with the evidence before someone else stumbled onto our midday office raid. Leaving Voss's house in the early afternoon, I felt a heaviness settle on my shoulders. The sun shone brightly overhead in a cloudless blue sky. Agatha trotted beside me, her fur gleaming like midnight. Corbin blackmailing Councilman Voss, this uprising is much bigger than we thought. I mused aloud. This isn't just about stopping Corbin, Agatha. It's about the entire magical community. Seems that way, Agatha replied. If Corbin's got Councilman Voss under his thumb, who else is involved? Half the council, probably, Agatha said, not missing a beat. Power attracts corruption like flies to honey. Or cats to food, I muttered with a weak smile. Tuna sounds delicious, young witch, Agatha said, her yellow eyes flashing. The town seemed oblivious to the malicious undercurrents running beneath its picturesque surface. The smell of blooming flowers wafted through the air. Every cheerful note, every burst of color, felt like a mockery of the danger we now faced. Agatha, this could destroy us all. She cut me off. Yes, we're in deeper trouble than you thought. Agatha and I finally reached our home, an old, ivy-covered cottage at the edge of town. Brad was there, and from the looks of things, he was reinforcing protection spells around the perimeter. His tall, well-built frame moved with practiced ease, and his spiky brown hair shone in the bright sunlight. He looked up and smiled when he saw us. "Hey, Sage. Everything all right?" he asked, his expression clouded with concern. "Not exactly," I admitted. "Agatha, grab a bite inside. I'll fill Brad in." "Don't have to tell me twice," Agatha said, darting through an open window. I walked up to the boy next door, dread tugging at my heart. "Brad, we found something big." He stepped closer, his eyebrows drawn together. "Tell me." "Corbin confronted me today and threatened me." Brad's eyes bulged at the news, but I pushed forward as there was more. "Then we found evidence that he's blackmailing Councilman Voss. And it turns out that Voss has been covering up Corbin's necromancy." Holy hell, saying it out loud made it feel even more real. And terrifying. Necromancy, blackmail, corrupt politicians. It was like a supernatural soap opera, except I was an unwilling star. "Whoa, slow down," Brad said, his expression turning serious. "Corbin threatened you." "Yes, in person this time." "No scary minions," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "It's huge, Brad. This could tear apart everything we know." The magical world was unraveling faster than a kitten playing with yarn. Part of me wished I could crawl under a blanket and pretend none of this was happening. But I knew I couldn't hide from the truth, no matter how ugly it was. "Come here," Brad said gently, drawing me into a tender embrace. His heat enveloped me, and I closed my eyes. For a moment, the world outside seemed less terrifying. I melted into him, soaking up his strength like a sponge. Brad's hugs were like a magical elixir, capable of chasing away even my darkest fears. Well, temporarily at least. If only he could bottle and sell them, we'd make a fortune. I rested my head on his shoulder. "I don't know what I'd do without you. Probably spiral into a vortex of anxiety and drown my sorrows in pints of cookie dough ice cream. Thank the goddess for Brad and his uncanny ability to keep me somewhat sane." "You're strong, Sage. You'll get through this," he murmured against my hair. "I'm always here for you." I wished we could stay like this forever. Or at least until the whole Corbin situation magically resolved itself. A girl could dream, right? Adulting was the worst sometimes. "Just be careful," he added, leaning back to look into my eyes. "Corbin's dangerous. But we'll find a way to stop him. Promise?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Promise," he said, leaning in to press a gentle kiss to my forehead. My heart raced at his nearness, making it even harder to focus on the dire situation. Traitorous heart. Now was so not the time for inconvenient feelings to rear their complicated head. I needed to focus on the supernatural crisis threatening to implode my world, not the way Brad's arms felt against my skin. Curse my horrible timing. "Let's sit on the porch," Brad said, releasing me reluctantly. "We need to plan our next steps." Next steps. Right. Because apparently, I was now in charge of preventing a magical apocalypse, or whatever. No pressure. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. "One thing at a time, Sage." We moved to the porch steps, the cool air wrapping around us. I glanced at Brad's profile, his jaw set and firm. Oh boy, here we go. Dropping supernatural truth bombs on cute warlocks was not in my weekend plans. But secrets between almost lovers? Recipe for disaster. Time to rip off the Band-Aid. "Brad," I said, my voice wavering. There's something else we need to talk about. What's up? He turned to me, concern etched into his features. I took a deep breath. Relax, Sage. It's not like you're confessing to a crime. Well, unless falling for your best friend is illegal in Witch World. Oh, wait. The High Witch came to visit me a few days ago and… I paused, searching for the right words. She said there's this rule. The Covenant of Veiled Boundaries. His brows knitted together. Okay, what's that? Why did witch laws have to sound like a bad fantasy movie? I braced myself for the impending doom. It's this old law, and it prohibits any romantic involvement between members of the council's inner circle, like me, and civilians like you. What? Are you serious? Brad's eyes widened, shock coloring his voice. That's freaking ridiculous. Yep, welcome to my world where ridiculous is the norm. I grimaced, my heart sinking low. I know, but I can't go against the High Witch. I'm so sorry. There has to be a way around this rule. His voice was edged with hurt. Oh, if only it were that simple. Loopholes and outdated witch contracts. Not likely. My chest ached seeing his pain. I said the same thing, but the High Witch was adamant. And I don't want to lose you. You're my best friend, Brad. I can't lose that. He was quiet a long time. So that's all we'll ever be. Friends now. Tears lined my eyes and I sniffed. My heart was breaking. Fan-freaking-tastic. Ugly crying in front of the guy that I first was crazy about. Way to keep it together, Sage. Yes. But it doesn't mean I don't care about you. He scooted away from me. Just what? You want me to pretend there's nothing more between us? That I don't care about you anymore? I'm not sure I can do that. Brad, please. Fresh tears dripped down my cheeks. I can't break the covenant. If I do, there'll be consequences. For both of us. He scoffed, running a hand through his spiky hair. You always were a rule follower, Sage. Oh, hell no. He did not just go there. My sadness morphed into frustration. Not by choice. I snapped back, more forcefully than I intended. I have responsibilities. To the council. To this town. You think I wanted this shit? Maybe not, he said, softer now. But we deserve to be happy too, don't we? Damn straight we do. But apparently, the universe missed that memo. I sighed. Of course we do. My voice broke. But we can still be friends. He looked at me, his expression full of conflicted emotions. How am I supposed to just pretend you're not everything to me? We sat there, hands intertwined and hearts heavy. Things would never be the same now. Freaking witchy politics ruining my love life. But I'd rather have Brad in my world as a friend than not at all. Even if my heart didn't quite agree. Chapter 9. The moon hung low, creating a spine-chilling glow over the graveyard. The air was thick with fog, slithering around the tombstones like ghostly figures. Bats swooped and darted above us, making me swallow my shrieks of surprise. I shivered and tugged my jacket tighter around me, wishing the fabric could protect me from my creeping anxiety. Are we sure this is the place? Brad's voice cut through the silence, his flashlight illuminating the dilapidated funeral parlor ahead of us. Yes. I got this location from a reliable source, Evie said, leading the way. Her flashlight lit the way, showing us the cracked wooden front door. Brad, Evie and I stepped inside, our flashlight beams slicing through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the air, disturbed by our presence. The funeral parlor was a relic of decay, its wilted wallpaper peeling away from the walls in long, ragged strips, revealing patches of mold that bloomed like dark, sinister flowers. The wooden floor beneath our feet groaned with each step as if protesting our intrusion. The air smelled thick with the stench of mildew and something else. It clung to the back of my throat, making me want to gag. Cobwebs draped from the corners of the ceiling, their delicate threads shimmering in the moonlight that shone through the windows. Evie shuddered. This place gives me the creeps. Brad nodded, his face pale. Yeah, let's find what we need and get out of here. We moved deeper into the parlor, passing rows of empty coffins, their lids askew and interiors lined with tattered satin. I heard the scuttling of tiny feet as rodents darted for cover. A once grand chandelier hung precariously above our heads, its crystals coated in dust, swaying as if stirred by a ghostly breath. This place is charming, Brad grumbled, nudging a broken chair aside with his foot. Looks like Corbin's taste in real estate is freaky old morgues, I said, swallowing against the rising panic. An old velvet curtain hung limply to one side, partially concealing a door that led to the embalming room. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere made it hard to breathe, as if the very walls were absorbing the life from us. Maybe it was? I shook myself. What a horrible thought. Check this out, Evie called from a corner where her flashlight glinted off something metallic. Brad and I hurried over, peering at the demonic artifacts Evie had uncovered. The scene was chilling. Skulls and bones were arranged in intricate, ritualistic patterns, forming a macabre circle on the floor. Each bone was meticulously placed, their yellowed surfaces gleaming dully in the flashlight beams. Candles, long since melted into grotesque shapes, stood at the cardinal points of the circle, their wax pooling around them like crimson tears. In the center of the circle lay a book, its cover bound in what looked disturbingly like human skin, the texture rough and sickeningly organic. The binding was stitched together with a blood-red thread, and the edges of the cover were frayed and cracked, as if from frequent unholy use. Evie lifted the book and opened it. The pages inside looked brittle and yellowed, covered with cramped, spidery handwriting and gruesome illustrations of necromantic rituals and infernal incantations. Definitely Corbin's handiwork, Brad said, his voice grim. Why can't he just stick to a normal hobby, like knitting? I tried to joke, but the sight before me turned my stomach. Because necromancers aren't known for their cozy hobbies, Evie replied dryly, scanning the macabre scene. Well, I think it's time he did, I returned, looking away to settle myself. Evie knelt beside the circle. These are necromantic rites. Look at the way the bones are arranged, this isn't just for show. Whoever did this was summoning, or at the very least, trying to commune with the dead. She pointed to the candles. The wax is mixed with blood, probably human. It's used to bind spirits to this plane, to keep them anchored here. Her finger traced the outline of the circle. And this pattern, it was a containment field. To trap whatever Corbin summoned. Well, isn't this just a delightful little arts and crafts project from hell? Leave it to Corbin to take his goth phase to the next level. Brad swallowed hard, his expression showing horror. And the book? Evie sighed. It's a grimoire, and these spells are meant to control the dead, to raise and command spirits. This is some seriously powerful and dangerous necromancy. I felt a chill touch my spine. So, this wasn't just amateur hour. More like, I majored in raising the dead with a minor in bad decisions. Whoever said college prepares you for the real world clearly never met Corbin. Evie grimaced. No, this is advanced stuff. Corbin knew exactly what he was doing. Brad looked around nervously. We need to get out of here. If Corbin comes back. I glanced towards the door. We need to take this book with us. If Corbin is involved, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Because apparently, my life wasn't complicated enough without adding a dash of necromancy to the mix. Thanks, universe. You really know how to keep things interesting. Evie closed the book, shuddering as she touched the creepy book cover. Let's go then. The sooner we get out of this place, the better. I longed to reach out, to let my fingers brush against Brad's, to reassure him and myself that everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't. Not with Ingrid's orders hanging over us like a curse. Forbidden love. It sounded so dramatic, like something out of a cheesy romance novel. But here I was, living it. I guess I should be flattered that my life had become so literary. Too bad the genre was less happily ever after, and more impending doom and gloom. Focus, Sage. We have a job to do. Wait. There's more over here. Evie held up a vial filled with a dark, viscous liquid. This looks like blood magic. Great. I sighed. Just what we needed. Another complication, as if my day wasn't already chock full of delightful surprises. I mean, really, who doesn't love stumbling upon a vial of blood magic on a Tuesday afternoon? In an abandoned morgue, no less. Totally normal. Brad, can you use your powers to check if there's anything hidden in the walls? Evie asked, turning to him. On it. Brad nodded, placing his hand against the wall and closing his eyes. His face tightened in concentration. As he worked, I admired his focus and dedication. He was so strong, so capable. Everything I admired, especially in moments like these. I appreciated the way Brad's brow furrowed as he channeled his magic. It was like watching a master artist at work, except instead of a paintbrush, he wielded supernatural powers. Found something, Brad announced, breaking my reverie. A section of the wall shimmered and then dissolved, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were more artifacts, each more sinister than the last. Corbin really went all out, Evie said, her voice low, raspy. We need to report this to Ingrid. She needs to know just how far Corbin's gone, but she forbid me from investigating, so what if we leave an anonymous tip? Or more like a one-way ticket to the magical doghouse. I could already picture Ingrid's disapproving glare, her eyebrow arched so high it practically merged with her hairline. But what choice did we have? It's not like I could waltz up to her and say, "Hey, remember when you explicitly told me not to investigate?" Well, surprise. I did it anyway. We can try, Brad said, his voice firm. Yet when he looked at me, there was a softness there, a tenderness that made my heart ache. Evie moved towards the exit. Let's get out of here. I've seen enough. Right behind you, Brad said, giving me one last lingering look. I forced myself to turn away, following Evie out of the funeral parlor. We stepped out into the graveyard, the breeze odoriferous with decay. The moon barely penetrated the overcast sky. Do you smell that? Evie wrinkled her nose, taking out her flashlight and scanning the area. Brad froze. Yeah. It's getting worse. Stay sharp, I warned. Corbin might have bobby traps in place or worse. Ah, the glamorous life of a witch, traipsing through graveyards and battling the forces of evil. I really should have become an accountant like Mom wanted. At least their biggest occupational hazard was paper cuts. Suddenly, there was movement from the gloom. A dozen undead creatures staggered towards us, their eyes lifeless, their mouths hanging open with drool. Their clothes hung in tatters, revealing mold-covered skin and exposed bones. Zombies. Evie shouted, reaching for her utility belt. Oh goody, brain munchers. And me without my industrial-sized bottle of hand sanitizer. Note to self, invest in a flamethrower for these delightful encounters. Get behind me, Brad commanded. He was raising his hands to conjure a magical shield around us. The translucent barrier shimmered, but I could see the strain on his face. My knight in shining armor. Well, minus the armor. And the horse. But that chiseled jaw and dogged bravery? Classic fairy tale material. Focus, Sage. Time to kick some zombie butt. Time to light things up. I started summoning my magic. Energy surged through my veins, and I released it in a dazzling display of light and force. Bolts of power shot from my hands, striking the zombies with exactness. They staggered back, disoriented. Ha! Take that, you walking corpses. Sage 1, Zombies 0. If only the High Witch could see me now. Nice one, Sage. Brad called, his voice tight with effort. Every spell took a piece of me, but I couldn't stop now. I had to protect my friends. Plus, I had a reputation to uphold. Sage the Zombie Slayer had a nice ring to it. Take this. Evie yelled, throwing a potion at the nearest zombie. It exploded on impact, sending bits of decayed flesh flying. The creature transformed into a harmless rabbit, hopping away in confusion. I couldn't help grinning. Leave it to Evie to bring some whimsy to a life-or-death battle. That girl's got style. Keep those potions coming, Evie. I urged, launching another magical blast at a group of zombies. They convulsed as though they were about to drop, their connection to Corbin severed by my magic. "Watch out, Sage," Brad shouted as a particularly grotesque zombie lunged at me. Its breath was a rancid cloud of death. "Got it." Brad's voice rang out, and he used his powers to erect a wall between me and the creature, crushing it under the force. "Close call," I said, wiping sweat from my brow. "Thanks, Brad." His stare met mine for a brief moment. "Focus, guys." Evie was hurling another potion. This one erupted in a blaze of green fire, scattering more zombies. "Let's finish this." My spells flowed more smoothly now, each strike weakening the undead further. For a moment, I was lost in the progression of battle, every action proof of our teamwork. "Behind you." Brad's warning snapped me back. I spun around, unleashing a burst of light that vaporized the zombies sneaking up on me. My body trembled, fear melding with adrenaline. Evie tossed her last potion, transforming another cluster of zombies into harmless hamsters. "Keep it up," Brad encouraged, reinforcing his shield to give us a moment's respite. "Just a few more," I said, focusing on a final, powerful spell. Lightning crackled from my fingertips, arcing towards the remaining zombies. They convulsed, their forms disintegrating under the raw power. "That's the last of them," Evie confirmed, breathing heavily. "For now, at least." "Terrific job, everyone," Brad said, lowering his shield and looking around. "But we need to stay vigilant. Corbin won't stop here." My body ached, but I knew we'd have to keep pushing forward. There was too much at stake. "That was intense," I said, trying to catch my breath. "I've never battled zombies before. Nor do I want to, ever again." Brad grunted, wiping grime off his face with his sleeve. "I need to gather my potion bottles," Evie said, already scouring the ground for her containers. "Be careful," Brad called after her. "Always am, Bradley." She disappeared behind a crumbling crypt. "Well, that went better than expected," I said, glancing at Brad. "Zombies, necromancers, magical artifacts, just another weeknight." "Yeah. You okay?" "Just feeling the rush." My heart was pounding, but not just from the fight. Brad's presence seemed to have that effect on me lately. It was like my body couldn't decide whether it wanted to run a marathon or melt into a puddle of goo whenever he was near. "Get it together, Sage. Focus on the mission, not the man." "Easier said than done." Brad moved closer. His voice softened. "You were incredible tonight, Sage. You weren't so bad yourself." Okay, that was the understatement of the century. Watching Brad unleash his warlock powers was awesome. The way his eyes flashed with arcane sorcery, the fluid grace of his movements as he cast spells, it was enough to make a witch weak in the knees. "Is that a compliment?" He grinned, his usual teasing timbre returning. "It could be." I smiled back, feeling the tension ease. "Forget the damn rules," he muttered, closing the distance between us. Our lips met in a tumultuous kiss, a fiery blend of passion and longing. The intensity of our emotions spilling over as we pressed our bodies closer in a desperate embrace. It felt like a collision of two hearts, bound by lust and desire, exploding in a tempestuous flurry of sensation. Holy hell, the man could kiss. If this was breaking the rules, then sign me up for a life of crime. I'd gladly face 100 zombies if it meant I got to experience this rush again. Brad's lips were like a magic spell all their own, turning my brain to mush and my body to jelly. "Guys?" Evie's voice shattered the moment. We broke apart, breathless and wide-eyed. Well, that was awkward. Nothing like getting caught making out in a graveyard by your best friend. I'm sure this will do wonders for my professional reputation. I could just picture the headline in the Emberwick Inquirer: "Sage Holland, Emberwick's resident part-time zombie hunter, found swapping spit on the job." Evie placed her items back into her belt. "Found all the bottles. Ready to talk necromancy?" Sure." "Why yeah," I stammered, composing myself. "Smooth, Sage. Real smooth. You'd think after years of magical training, I'd be better at thinking on my feet." But apparently, all it takes is one knee-weakening kiss from Brad to turn me into a tongue-tied mess. Some badass witch I am. Brad looked equally flustered but managed a nod. Great, Evie said, oblivious to the graveyard kissing. So here's what I've found out. Necromancy isn't just about raising the dead. It's about controlling them, bending their will to the necromancer's commands. Like Corbin's doing, Brad interjected, still stealing glances at me. Exactly, Evie said. But it requires immense power and a deep connection to the underworld. The artifacts we've seen are likely conduits amplifying his control. Why would he need such control? I asked, trying to focus on the conversation. And not on the lingering taste of Brad's lips, or the way his hand kept brushing against mine, sending little jolts of electricity up my arm. Priorities, Sage. World-ending necromancer now, tonsil hockey later. Power. Influence. Chaos, Evie replied, ticking off points on her fingers. Necromancers like Corbin thrive on disrupting the natural order. If he succeeds, he could unleash an army of the undead on Emberwick Crossing, and the supernatural uprising will officially begin. Oh joy! An undead apocalypse. Just what this town needs to liven things up. I suppressed an eye roll. Necromancers and their obsessions with death and decay, some witches and warlocks have the worst hobbies, I swear. Which means we need to stop him, Brad said, his voice emotional. Thank you, Captain Obvious. I bit my tongue before the quip could escape. Now was so not the time for my offbeat commentary, even if it would alleviate the dire mood. Brad looked genuinely worried. His furrowed brow was kind of adorable, though. Stop it, Sage. Can we go home now? I said, feeling exhausted. Evie shot me an amused glance, no doubt reading my mind. Perceptive as always, that one. She knew I was about 2 seconds from suggesting we grab a pint of mint chocolate chip and put this whole necromancer business on ice for the night. My bed was calling to me like a siren song. Yeah, come on, Evie said and led the way out of the cemetery. Evie, wait up, I called, catching up to her. Brad was right behind me. What are you thinking, Sage? Evie turned to look at me with a curious expression. Just thinking about what you said. If Corbin's control over the undead is that strong, how do we weaken it? Excellent question, Brad added, his tone serious now. From my research, Evie said, there are a few ways to disrupt a necromancer's connection. Destroying the artifacts he's using would be a start. But there are also very old spells and unholy rituals designed specifically for this purpose. I might find something we can use in his book. Like a counter-ritual? I asked, my brain already whirling with possibilities. Exactly, Evie confirmed. But they're complex and require precise execution. Which means we need to find those spells and learn them fast, Brad said, determination etched into his features. Corbin's not working alone, Brad revealed. He's got followers. People who believe in his cause. Great, I grumbled. More problems. Which means we need to be careful, Brad said, his voice softening as he looked at me. Especially you, Sage. Me? Why? I asked, taken aback. Because you're special, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. Your magic, your creativity. You're a threat to him. And to others who don't understand you. A sudden thought slammed into me. What if Brad and I were seen kissing? Crap on a cracker. The High Witch would have my head on a platter. I really needed to get my priorities straight, right after I got some sleep. Chapter 10. I reread the note, meet me in the woods at sundown. Make sure no one sees you. The paper crinkled in my hand, Brad's scrawl unmistakable. I threw it into the fireplace and watched it burn. Ingrid would be furious if she knew, but the pull towards Brad was magnetic, irresistible. What was I thinking? This was a terrible idea. Sneaking off to meet Brad, risking everything, my position, Ingrid's trust, the council's wrath. Yet here I was, powerless against my own desires. I should stay home and not go. It sounded hollow even to my own ears. Who was I kidding? Obviously, I was going. Forbidden love waits for no witch. Still, I battled my desire for Brad against the primeval rule, the covenant of veiled boundaries, that strictly forbid romance between members of the council's inner circle and private citizens like Brad. As if legislating love had ever worked out well. Romeo and Juliet. But hey, I was sure this would end much better for Brad and me. At least I hoped. The sun sank lower in the sky, and I stood at the window looking out. I waited until the world outside fell silent, then slipped out the back door and walked across town until I reached the woods. I moved through the grove, the path darkening as dusk approached. The woods were alive with sound, rustling leaves, distant bird calls, the faint howl of the wind through the trees. Each noise sent a spike of adrenaline through me. The thrill of the forbidden rendezvous heightened my senses. The breeze became cooler, the light fading into an eerie twilight. Don't get caught. I stepped carefully over a fallen branch. The last thing I needed was someone hearing me. My blood pounded louder than my footsteps. Just keep moving. Every crunch of leaves underfoot felt like an alarm bell. Shadows shifted, creating phantom figures that made me jump. The woods seemed to close in around me, each tree a potential witness. Why am I doing this? Yet I knew why. Brad. His smile, his laugh, the way his expression lit up when he talked about something he loved. I couldn't stay away, no matter what Ingrid said. Apparently, I had a weakness for pretty boys with nice smiles. Who knew? Oh right, everyone. I ducked under a low-hanging branch. The clearing wasn't far now. The thought of seeing Brad kept me going, in spite of the gnawing fear. My steps quickened, the anticipation building with each passing second. My breathing speeded up, and I started pushing through the final thicket. The clearing opened before me, bathed in the faint glow of the setting sun. I took a deep breath, the tension in my chest loosening just a bit. I sighed, looking around for any sign of Brad. The swish of branches behind me made me spin around, heart hammering hard and quick. Hey, Brad's voice came softly from the darkness. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. He stepped into view, his form bringing a wave of relief and excitement. You're here, I said, my voice trembling. He smiled, that same boyish grin that always made my insides melt. Of course I am. My heart swelled. Every fiber of my being warned that this was wrong, dangerous even. Except standing there with Brad, nothing else mattered. Forbidden love, 1. Common sense, 0. Come here, Brad said, opening his arms. I didn't hesitate. I hurried over to Brad. He drew me into his arms and I breathed him in. He smelled like pine and musk and all male, intoxicating. In his embrace, the world seemed to pause as he held me tight. Missed you, he murmured into my hair. Missed you too. My voice caught, thick with longing. I pulled back, taking him in. Artfully tousled hair, blue eyes bright in the candlelight. That gray t-shirt hugging his muscular frame, and a pair of worn jeans that somehow looked stylish on him. What's all this? I gestured to the blankets, the wine, the lit candles transforming the forest clearing into something magical. A bottle of wine and 2 plastic cups sat off to one side. A crooked smile. Thought we could use a little us time. Wine? Ever the charmer. I tried for coy, but my face betrayed me, breaking into a full grin. Only for you. His voice was earnest and soft. It tugged at my heart. My heart swelled at his sincerity. Classic Brad, always knowing just what to say to turn my insides to mush. I wanted to believe him, to get swept up in the romance of it all. But the sensible part of my brain kept throwing up warning signs. The inner circle and civilians weren't supposed to intermingle. Not like this. Reality crashed back, cold and sobering. This is risky, Brad. If Ingrid finds out. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, gentle and sweet. Tonight's ours, okay? Let's make it count. I swallowed. Okay. He poured the wine, handing me a cup. We clinked our cups against each other. To us, he said, holding my gaze. To us, I said. The sentiment felt loaded. Dangerous. Thrilling. I took a sip. The wine tasted bitter and oaky. We settled on the blankets, knees touching. I savored the forbidden thrill of it, the delicious wrongness. Two magical beings, flouting the rules, daring to imagine a future. It was like playing with fire, exhilarating and liable to burn me. But with Brad beside me, I couldn't bring myself to care. "How's work been?" he asked. "Busy. Lots of new design clients," I said, sitting beside him. "But it's good, you know? Keeps my mind occupied, busy." I told him about my design clients, the way the projects consumed my thoughts. Left less room for brooding about impossible futures. "Keeping busy to stop from thinking about us, you mean?" Perceptive as always. It was unnerving sometimes, how easily he could read me. Like he had a direct line to my thoughts. I wondered, not for the first time, if warlocks could do that, read minds. It would explain a lot. Then again, maybe he just knew me that well. I sighed, leaning into his solid frame. Wishing for something doesn't make it possible. Doesn't make it impossible either. He tipped my chin up, expression blazing with intensity. "I'm not giving up on us, Sage. No matter what the council says." My pulse thrummed, his proximity sending tingles across my skin. "You really are too stubborn for your own good." "Persistent," he corrected with a roguish wink. Then sobering, "I mean it though. I can't stay away from you." I rolled my eyes, fighting back a smile. Leave it to Brad to reframe stubbornness as a virtue. His optimism was infectious, his determination firm. It made me want to believe in the impossible, in a world where we could be a couple without fear or consequence. A girl could dream. "I don't want you to stay away," I admitted, desire and dread knotting in my stomach. "Just promise we'll be careful?" "Always." Solemn and sincere. Sealing it with the softest brush of lips, a mere whisper of a kiss. "Now, enough serious talk. Tonight's for us, remember?" I smiled against his mouth. Remind me again what that entails?" I was torn between the affection I felt for him and the fear of what could happen if we were discovered. But in that moment, all I wanted was him. The rest of the world could wait. He was right. Tonight it was only me, Brad, and the star-strewn sky above. "Well," Brad said, reaching for the wine bottle, "it involves this." He poured the dark red liquid into plastic cups, the sound almost musical in the stillness of the woods. Handing me a cup, he added with a grin, "And maybe a little more of this." The wine was sweet on my tongue, and I moaned. "Remember when we tried to build a treehouse in your backyard?" Brad reminisced, leaning against the tree. I laughed, the memory resurfacing. How could I forget? We spent weeks planning it, gathering materials, and convincing our parents to let us do it. You were an architect even way back then. And then, when we finally got it built, it was so crooked and unstable that we were afraid to go inside. He chuckled. I smiled fondly. It was still our little hideout. We had so many great adventures in that lopsided treehouse. Those were the days, Brad sighed wistfully. Back when our biggest worry was making it home before the streetlights came on. I nodded, taking a sip of my drink. Yeah, life was so much simpler then. Before rules complicated everything. Brad leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I found this old spellbook in my house. Must have belonged to my parents. He was changing the subject. Typical Brad, always trying to distract me with some new magical discovery when things got too serious. It was equal parts endearing and exasperating. What kind of spells? Mostly basic stuff, but there was one about creating more powerful protective barriers. Thought it might come in handy. You're always thinking ahead, I said, touched by his thoughtfulness. I really appreciate it. Anything for you, Sage. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, just enjoying each other's presence. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, radiating a soft silver glow on the ferns and trees around us. It felt like we were the only two people in the world, wrapped in a cocoon of secrecy and stolen moments. Chapter 11. I savored this precious pocket of time with Brad, away from the prying eyes of the council. If only we could stay like this forever, unburdened by expectations and outdated traditions. But reality had a pesky way of intruding on even the most perfect moments. "Look at the moon," Brad said, pointing up. "Isn't it beautiful?" I murmured, but my stare was fixed on him. The way the moonlight highlighted the angles of his face, the gold flecks in his eyes, it was breathtaking. "Beautiful." He caught me staring and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "Just, how lucky I am to have you in my life. And how terrified I was of losing him if our secret ever got out. Feelings mutual. You know, we don't have to keep this secret forever. Brad, we've talked about this. We can't get caught until we find a work around the rule." "Stop worrying so much," he interrupted. Could we really defy the High Witch and come out unscathed? Part of me yearned to throw caution to the wind and proclaim my love for Brad from the rooftops. But the rational side knew we were treading on thin ice. One wrong move and everything could come crashing down around us. Would I be banished from the magical community if we got caught? Or worse, forced to scrub cauldrons for the next century as punishment? Not exactly how I wanted to make my parents proud. But somehow, when I was with Brad, none of that seemed to matter. When we were together, it felt like nothing could touch us. No rules, no responsibilities, no judging eyes watching our every move. It was just me and him and the thrill of the forbidden. "Hey," Brad's voice softened, hauling me from my thoughts. "We'll be okay. Trust me." "I do. It's everyone else that I'm worried about. Especially Ingrid. She already had her suspicions about us. If she ever found concrete proof, there's no telling what she might do. Trust me. We only have to sneak around for a little while," he said, squeezing my hand. I leaned my head on his shoulder. "So tell me more about this spell book." Now I was the one changing the topic. "Okay, but first," he paused dramatically, "you have to promise not to laugh." I arched an eyebrow, grateful for the temporary distraction. "Oh, this should be good." He rolled his eyes. Apparently, one of my parents had a thing for love potions. There's an entire chapter dedicated to them. I smirked. Thinking of brewing one up for someone special? He playfully bumped my shoulder. "I think I've already got the girl of my dreams right here." My cheeks heated up. "Very smooth." I giggled and my heart soared. Moments like these made all the secrecy and sneaking around worth it. We continued talking, sharing stories and secrets. Here, under the moonlit sky, we were free. Free to be ourselves, free to be in a relationship. But as the night wore on, reality began to creep back in. My loyalty to Ingrid, the risks we were taking, it all weighed heavily on my thoughts. Could I really balance my desires with my duties? And what would happen if I couldn't? "Brad," I said softly, breaking the peaceful silence. "Promise me something." "Anything. Promise me we'll find a way to make this work. No matter what it takes." "Promise," he said without hesitation. In that moment, I believed him. Hope lingered like a fragile thread binding us as one. I wanted to believe it with every fiber of my being. "Sage," he whispered, leaning closer. I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, the whiff of pine and earth and his sandalwood cologne. He turned towards me, his blue eyes catching the silver light filtering through the trees. "Yes?" My voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Let's not waste any more time." Instantly, we were moving towards each other with an urgency. Our lips met in a sudden, electric kiss. Sparks ignited in my veins, my skin tingling with a blend of anticipation and raw desire. His hands found their way to my waist, pulling me closer as if trying to merge our bodies into one. I responded with equal fervor, my fingers threading through his thick hair. The kiss deepened, and I could taste the wine on his lips, sweet and beguiling. Every touch, every caress seemed to set my senses ablaze. "Goddess Sage." Brad groaned against my mouth, his breathing fast and ragged. "I love kissing you." The truth of it hit me like a tidal wave, how much I cared about him, how much I craved this connection, forbidden or not. His hands roamed over my back, and I pressed closer into his body. I felt a surge of heat between us, the world narrowing down to just the two of us in this moonlit clearing. We tumbled onto the blanket, limbs tangled, kisses growing more frantic. "You're so beautiful." His lips were caressing against my neck. My skin burned where he touched, a trail of fire left in his wake. I arched into him, wanting more, needing more. I moaned softly, unable to form coherent thoughts. His hands were everywhere, my hips, my thighs, tracing the curve of my body as if memorizing every inch. Goodbye rational thinking, hello hormones. Who needs magic when you've got Brad's hands working their own special brand of sorcery? I should probably feel guilty about this, but damn, it felt too good to stop. His mouth captured mine again. I was overwhelmed with passion and hunger, a desperate attempt to make up for lost time. His fingers slipped under my shirt, grazing my bare skin, and I gasped at the sensation. "Do you know how much I've thought about you?" he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "Every single day." I sighed. The heart wanted what it wanted, even if it was completely off-limits according to which protocol. But even as I gave in to the sizzling heat of our embrace, a part of me couldn't halt the shadow of guilt. Ingrid's disapproval loomed in the back of my mind, reminding me of the risks. This wasn't just a simple romance. It was a rebellion against everything I had been taught to value. Damn. Ingrid and her rules could wait. Right now, all I wanted was to lose myself in Brad's arms and pretend the world outside didn't exist. But I suppose a little restraint wouldn't kill me. Much. I moved away, my breathing shallow. He looked at me, worry etched across his handsome face. He lowered his hands and blew out a long breath. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just let's take it slow." "No problem," he said, his gaze searching mine. "Whatever you need." We lay there, bodies entwined, the night wrapping around us like a cocoon. I wondered what the future held. Could we really defy the odds? Or were we destined for heartbreak? "Promise me," I whispered again. "Promise me we'll figure this out." "Promise," he replied without hesitation, his lips grazing my forehead. The night felt like it belonged to us alone, but reality snapped back when I heard the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on the nearby trail. My heart leapt into my throat. Great, just when things were getting interesting. "Did you hear that?" I pulled away from Brad. "Yes." "We need to be quiet," he said, his voice low and tense. Suddenly a council member, cloaked in royal blue robes, walked along the trail with a large black dog. The council member's brown hair bounced on her shoulders, and the dog's ears were perked, alert to every sound. Being a council member, this woman would report our illicit meeting without hesitation to the High Witch. Shit. Adrenaline surged through my veins. We can't get caught. Not after all the trouble I went through to sneak out tonight. I was Ingrid's ever-loyal apprentice, sneaking around after nightfall with my best friend like we were a couple of teenagers. What would the High Witch think if she knew I was breaking the sacred rules? That I was willing to risk it all, my position, her trust, everything I'd worked for, just for a few stolen moments with Brad. Brad's grip on my hand tightened. "Stay still. Don't make a sound." Every rustle of leaves seemed deafening now, each snap of a twig amplifying my fear. The council member paused, looking around. The dog sniffed the air, its sharp senses making my pulse sprint even faster. Please keep walking." I clutched Brad's hand as if it were a lifeline. What would Ingrid do if she found out? My loyalty questioned, my place in the magical community threatened. And worse, Brad could face severe consequences too. All because we wanted one night to ourselves. Was that too much to ask? Why did we think this was a good idea again? My voice was quivering. "Because sometimes breaking the rules is worth it," Brad said, his breath warm against my ear. "But let's just not get caught doing it." He gave me that roguish smile that made my insides flutter. The council member seemed to hesitate for an eternity before finally continuing down the path, the dog trotting beside them. We stayed motionless, barely daring to breathe until they were well out of earshot. That was too close. I exhaled a shaky breath. Way too close for comfort. But we're okay. For now. We stood up, brushing off the leaves and dirt. We made our way back through the woods. The thrill of our secret affair warred with the ever-present danger. Each step reminded me of the precarious line we walked, balancing desire and duty. Yet despite the risks, I couldn't deny the attraction I had for Brad, or the exhilaration of defying the forbidden. Who knew being a rebel could be so intoxicating? Next time, Brad said with a wry smile, let's find a safer place. Next time? I grinned. Are you always this optimistic? Only when I'm with you. Now let's get out of here before our luck runs out. I pondered how long we could keep this secret. The stakes were high, but so was the allure of the forbidden. And for now, that was enough to keep me coming back for more. Chapter 12. Sage. Outside now. Brad's voice was urgent and sharp from my porch. Without hesitation, I bolted through the doorway, the heavy slam of the door behind me reverberating like a warning. His eyes, wide with panic, met mine. Corbin's here, he gasped, with an army. My heart slammed into my chest as the gravity of the situation sunk in. What? He panted. Corbin, an army attacking Emberwick Crossing. An army of the dead, and he's raising more. I barely had time to process before we were hurtling towards the heart of the town. We sprinted through the streets, Brad's long strides matching mine. Our movements resonated off the cobblestone streets, matching the pounding of fear and adrenaline in my veins. The sound of battle engulfed us before we even turned the corner. Fear knotted in my stomach, but a fierce protective instinct burned hotter. We skidded into the town square. The town square came into view, transformed into a battleground by Corbin Grimm's fiendish presence. His maniacal laughter cut through the air as skeletal figures swarmed the townspeople, their bones clacking ominously. Evie and Freya stood at the center of it all, surrounded by foes yet steadfast in their resolve. Holy hell, this wasn't in my job description. Emberwick Crossing, my home, was under siege. Corbin Grimm, the necromancer, was cackling like a madman near the fountain's edge. An army of skeletons, their bones clacking as they swarmed the townspeople. Evie and Freya were surrounded, fighting with everything they had. I could see the terror in their expressions. Their magic, usually a vision of grace, was now scattered and frenzied. Emberwick Crossing was under siege, its very existence at stake as we faced off against Corbin and his horde of death. This wasn't just a battle, it was a fight for our home, our lives intertwined in a desperate struggle against malevolent forces. I clenched my fists. We've got your back. Channeling my magic into my hands, I formed a protective shield around them, a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness. A temporary reprieve. We must stop them. Brad shouted to our friends. Well, this was just peachy. Emberwick under attack, my friends in danger, and a necromancer who clearly missed the memo on not being a total jerk. Another day in my life. I mean, who needs normal hobbies when you could raise an army of the undead? Time to show this bonehead what a real witch could do. Brad's voice blazed with power as he issued commands with staunch authority. Form a barrier. Now. As one, the townsfolk rallied together and raised their hands, their combined efforts creating a shimmering dome that enveloped us, allies united in defense against a common enemy. Sage, focus on defending the civilians. Brad barked. I'll engage Corbin. Damn it, Brad. I wanted to say, but he was right. Naturally, he was right. Brad, always the hero. I wanted to argue, to insist on facing Corbin united, but I knew better. The people needed me. And someone had to keep an eye on Mr. Tall, devilish, and necromantic. I just hoped Brad's architectural mojo was up to snuff against a guy who could literally raise the roof with an army of skeletons. The air hissed with dark malice as Corbin stepped forward, green eyes glowing. Behind him, skeletal figures emerged, their clattering bones a grotesque concerto. He was unleashing hell upon us. Evie shields. I shouted over the noise. Got it, she replied, her hands weaving an intricate pattern, conjuring shimmering barriers. Good old Evie, always ready with a magical assist. If we survived this, I owed her a girls' night out. Preferably somewhere sans skeletons and megalomaniacal warlocks. Freya, hold the line. Her nod was resolute as she summoned vines from the ground, ensnaring advancing skeletons. Brad's hands moved, earth rising to form golems that marched towards the fray. I could feel his intention pulsing, his spells a pledge of protection. I launched my own magic, spells I'd crafted in secret, hitting the dead with bursts of light and color. Each impact was a defiance, each incantation a hope to save our home. Fear clawed at me, but I forced it down. I had to be strong, for Emberwick, for my friends. Corbin's laughter rang out, his green eyes gleaming with hellish power. Die, bitch. He snarled, sending a ripple of necrotic enchantment my way. Oh, hell no. This jerk did not just try to blast me with his creepy death magic. Time to show him what a real witch could do. I may not have had an army of the undead at my beck and call, but I had something better: friends, tenacity, and a serious knack for kicking supernatural butt. Dodging with lightning-fast reflexes, I felt the brush of death against my skin. The raw power of the necromancer was unlike anything I'd faced. But I couldn't let doubt seep in, not now. Never. I spat, countering with a blast of my own, a collision of forces that sent shockwaves through the square. Bone shattered against stone, the sound coalescing with the cries of combat. The stench of decay clogged the air, a visceral reminder of the stakes we battled for. Corbin's skeleton army was relentless, a tide of death that refused to ebb. Freya stood firm, helping those injured by the skeletons. Spells blasted and weapons clashed in a frenzy of magic and steel. Freya's voice rang out amidst the madness. Push them back. I got this. Brad's voice rang clear even as a skeleton's blade grazed his arm. He didn't falter, his face set in fierce concentration as he repaired the damaged buildings around us, using them as fortresses. The clash of metal against bone lined my ears. I unleashed bursts of magic, each spell a defiant outcry against the encroaching darkness that sought to engulf us all. Stay strong. I called out, feeling the strain of my magic. Corbin's gaze met mine, a sinister smile on his lips, a deadly promise of destruction that fueled my resolve even further. Emberwick Crossing depended on us on this stand. And I wouldn't let it fall, not to Corbin, not to anyone. Brad, Evie, and Freya fought side by side against Corbin and his army of skeletons. The cobblestone streets ran red with blood as the townspeople valiantly defended their home. Corbin's unholy spellcraft slithered around us, an oppressive force that seemed to sap the very life from the air. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a recap of what was at stake. I glanced over and saw Evie hurling a potion into the fray, and it exploded in a burst of lavender smoke, transforming two skeletal warriors into harmless critters. Nice one, Evie! I shouted, dodging another skeleton's swipe. My hand shot up, releasing a stream of azure flames that incinerated the creature instantly. Thanks a bunch, Sage. Watch your right. Evie yelled back. I spun just in time to deflect a blow with a hastily conjured shield, the impact sending vibrations through my arm. Pain flared, but I pushed it aside, focusing on survival. On winning. I unleashed bursts of light and color, each impact a defiance against the darkness. Adrenaline was fueling my every move. Sage, cover me. Brad's voice cut through the bedlam, the command clear and precise. I responded by summoning my power. A blast of magic struck a group of skeletons and shattering their bones with crushing force. Keep pushing forward, Brad urged, his magic shaping barriers and traps that slowed the undead onslaught. His face was etched with fierce concentration as he repaired damaged buildings, turning them into fortresses for our defense. Stones shifted and melded all together under his command, creating sturdy walls that deflected the relentless attacks. Evie's hands worked in a blur, weaving intricate patterns in the air as she threw potion bottles to protect us from Corbin's attacks. We can do this, she shouted. Each bottle shattered on impact, releasing bursts of flames, ice, or acid that dissolved the skeleton's bones with sickening sizzles. The scene was anarchy, an orchestra of clashing weapons, sizzling magic, and shouted commands. The odor of burning bones and earth plugged my nostrils, and the metallic tang of blood. Every sense was heightened, every moment a fight for survival. Limbs and shards of bone flew through the air, each strike of our weapons accompanied by the nauseating crunch of breaking skeletons. "Brad, we need to take down Corbin," I shouted over the din, my voice cracking under the tension. "Easier said than done." "Working on it," Brad replied, his voice strained as he summoned a massive earthen spike that impaled a cluster of skeletons, sending shattered bones in every direction. "Stay focused, Sage." I was channeling energy into a new spell. No pressure, just the fate of Emberwick Crossing in my hands. Sweat poured down my face, my muscles trembling with the effort of maintaining my concentration. "You're good, but not good enough." Corbin sneered, his stare glowing green as he sent another wave of demonic spellcraft towards us. The ground where the magic hit erupted in opaque flames, consuming everything in its path. "Think again," I countered, discharging a reflective barrier that bounced his attack back at him. The sinister magic collided with his own shield, exploding in a shower of sparks, embers, and smoke. The shock on his face was fleeting, quickly replaced by rage. Guess he didn't see that coming. Point for Team Sage. I allowed myself a brief grim smile before focusing back on the fight. A resident, one of my neighbors I think, swung his sword. The blade flashed as he decapitated a skeleton, its skull rolling away. "Freya, Evie, cover Sage," Brad commanded. "On it!" They both chorused. They were moving to flank me, their abilities a protective shield. I couldn't ask for better backup. The fate of Emberwick Crossing rested in our hands, and failure wasn't an option. We fought with everything we had, pushing through the exhaustion and pain. Each strike was met with a counterattack, each spell a demonstration of our combined resilience. Blood and dirt beneath our feet, and breeze teeming with the constant haunting clatter of skeletal remains tumbling to the ground. A skeleton lunged at me, its bony fingers reaching for my throat. I blasted it apart with a burst of raw power, the bones disintegrating into dust. But there were always more, an endless tide of undead soldiers driven by Corbin's malevolent will. "Watch out!" Evie screamed, hurling a potion that exploded into a wall of fire, just in time to incinerate a group of skeletons that had been closing in on Brad. "I owe you one," Brad yelled back, using the brief respite to unleash a wave of earthen spikes, skewering more of the undead. Corbin's laughter thundered through the battlefield, chilling and mocking. "You think you can defeat me? Pathetic." He raised his hands, summoning a horde of new skeletons from the earth, their eyes radiant with unholy hellfire. "Keep fighting," I shouted, the power of my spells building into a crescendo. With a final, focused effort, I released the spell. A wave of pure, red-hot sorcery erupted from my hands, sweeping across the battlefield. 5 skeletons disintegrated upon contact, their bones turning to ash. Corbin's green shield buckled under the assault, and for the first time I saw fear in his expression. Brad sent a massive boulder hurtling towards a group of skeletons attacking 3 witches. "Here goes nothing," I said. "Famous last word, Sage. Let's hope they're not actually my last." I started summoning my power into a new, more formidable spell. I could feel the power building within me, ready to be unleashed. With a war cry, I released the spell, a burst of pure, unadulterated magic aimed straight at Corbin. This better work, or I was going to feel really silly about that war cry. "You can't stop me, you stupid bitch," Corbin roared, his own spell meeting mine in a cataclysmic clash. The world seemed to hold its breath as our magics thundered, the air vibrating with raw power. It was now or never. Time to show this jerk who's boss. And then take a long vacation when this was all over. Chapter 13. Hold the line, Brad commanded. I barely had time to register his command before diving to dodge a skeletal warrior's blade. The creature's empty eye sockets seemed to mock me as it swung again. "Seriously, Corbin?" Skeletons. How cliché could you get? I rolled to my feet. For an evil mastermind, his minion game was pretty weak. You'd think a power-hungry warlock could conjure up something more original than the skeleton crew. Points for nostalgia, I guess. Evie, a little help here? My voice was hoarse, my breath coming in short gasps. Sweat trickled down my forehead, merging with the grime and blood of battle. Note to self, add battle-proof makeup to the magical wish list. No one said saving the world would be glamorous. But would it kill the forces of darkness to schedule their apocalyptic showdowns after I've had my morning coffee? On it! Evie shouted back. She threw a potion vial, shattering it against the skeleton's chest. Green flames erupted, turning the undead monstrosity into a squirrel. Sage, you need to be more careful. Yeah, tell that to them. I glanced around at the swarming horde. The skeletons kept coming, an endless sea of clattering bones. Mom and Dad always said I was destined for great things. Somehow, I didn't think this was what they had in mind. Battling an undead army wasn't exactly in the How to Be a Kick-Ass Witch handbook. I saw Freya tending to the wounded and healing the townsfolk from gashes and injuries. Bless her heart. Even in the midst of battle, she never stopped caring for others. Me. I was just trying not to become a chew toy for the skeleton army. Incoming! Brad yelled. He summoned a wall of earth, blocking another wave of skeletons. His magic was strong, but even he was starting to show signs of fatigue. There wasn't time to feel tired or scared. I had to keep fighting, keep pushing forward. For my friends, for the innocent people caught in the crossfire, and for the memory of my parents. They had believed in me, and I wouldn't let them down. Even if it meant facing an army of the undead with nothing but my wits and a killer pair of boots. Suddenly, Councilman Voss appeared beside me, his robes billowing. Sage, together we might stand a chance. Councilman Voss? What are you doing here? My mouth popped open, then slammed shut. I had lots of questions, but I knew there was no time for answers. I never thought I'd be fighting side by side with a council member. Life was full of surprises, I guess. Next thing I knew, we'd be swapping recipes and braiding each other's hair. Assuming we survived this little shindig, of course. Later, he replied curtly. His magic flared, sending a dozen skeletons flying. Fine by me. I grunted, focusing back on the fight. I couldn't afford distractions. Not when the fate of the world hung in the balance. Time to show these boneheads what a witch with a mission can do. Brad, Freya, cover the left flank. I called out, trying to keep our formation tight. Evie, you're with me. Got it. Brad replied, his voice resolute. I hoped Brad's earth magic could shore up our defenses. His boulders had turned many enemies into piles of rubble and dust. Though right now I'd settle for a nice earthen wall to duck behind. Let's take down some bony foes. Evie smirked, and she tossed another combustible potion into the fray. The explosion sent a shower of bone fragments into the air, the sound of shattering skeletons echoing across the battlefield. We moved as one, a coordinated squad of violence and magic. Bones shattered, spells hummed, and the air was thick with the disgusting odor of burning flesh and ozone. Each moment stretched into eternity, every heartbeat a fragile promise of survival. Brad's earthen spikes erupted from the ground, impaling skeletons and turning them into heaps of dust. Freya moved with precision, her healing spells mending wounds in the blink of an eye, allowing the fighters to keep pushing forward. Stay sharp, everyone, I warned, my gaze scanning the battlefield for Corbin. The necromancer was nowhere to be seen, but his influence was everywhere. The skeletons fought with relentless precision, driven by his malicious will. The ground was littered with fragments of bone and the smoldering remains of skeletons. Brad's boulders smashed through the skeletal ranks, their impact resonating with the crunch of pulverized bone. His earth manipulation was relentless, creating barriers and traps that slowed the enemy's advance. He gritted his teeth, sweat glistening on his brow as he summoned yet another stone barrier to protect us. Brad was really in his element, his magic shaping the battlefield to our advantage. Hopefully, he wasn't tiring himself out too much. I made a mental note to check on him when this was over. Freya darted between the fighters, her hands glowing with healing magic. She knelt beside a fallen ally, her touch mending wounds and staunching the flow of blood. "Hold on," she murmured. With a wave of her hand, she sent a wave of healing power that revitalized the nearby fighters, giving them the strength to keep battling. Bless Freya and her healing gifts. She was grace under pressure, never losing her cool even when the fighting got intense. I hoped she knew how much we all appreciated her. Definitely after this I'd take her out for a spa day, her treat. She's earned it. "Watch your six," Brad shouted, a boulder smashing into a group of advancing skeletons, sending them flying in a cascade of shattered bones. "Thanks," I replied, releasing a quick shield spell to protect him from an incoming attack. An inhuman bolt of sorcery struck the shield and dissipated, the force of it causing a ripple through the magical barrier. I gave Brad a quick thumbs up. We made a great team out here, watching each other's backs. With my shields and his earth magic, we could hold this line. And with Evie and Freya supporting us, I felt like we could take on anything, even Corbin's creepy skeleton army. As long as we stuck together, we just might make it through this. "Don't mention it," he said, panting. "Just stay alive." "That's the plan," I shot back, though my muscles screamed in protest. Every spell drained more of my energy, but there was no time to rest. Councilman Alden Voss appeared beside us, his presence commanding and his eyes gleaming with a fierce intensity. "I've got your right flank," he said, raising his hands. Flames burst from his fingertips, incinerating a line of skeletons that had broken through our defenses. The fire roared and crackled, the heat intense enough to singe the air around us. "Voss, good timing," I shouted. "Let's make this quick," Voss replied, an edge to his voice. He unleashed another wave of fire, turning skeletons to ash in a heartbeat. "Need more protection here," Freya said, placing gauze on a man seeping blood from a leg wound. Her healing magic flowed into him, closing the wound and easing his pain. Councilman Voss stepped forward. Fireballs rained down on the attackers, giving us a momentary respite. The skeletons disintegrated in the fiery onslaught, their bones turning to ash. Suddenly, a burst of flame shot through the battlefield, incinerating a line of skeletons. Councilman Voss walked through the middle of the battle. His expression was alight with the fury of his fire elemental spells, and his hands glowed with a fierce orange light. Evie tossed another potion, this one exploding into a thick, noxious cloud that caused skeletons to crumble as they passed through it. The battlefield was a maelstrom of destruction and death. Skeletons swarmed us from all sides, their bony hands clawing and scraping. Brad summoned walls of earth to block their path, while Voss's firestorms created barriers of flame. Evie and I moved in tandem, her potions and my spells weaving together to create devastating effects. Councilman Voss smirked, then he thrust his hands forward, sending a torrent of fire that swept across the battlefield, reducing the skeletons to charred heaps. "Behind you, Sage," Freya shouted. I spun around just in time to see a skeleton swinging a rusted sword at my head. I ducked, feeling the blade whistle past my ear, and blasted the creature apart with a bolt of raw magic. "You're a lifesaver, Freya," I called out, my heart pounding. A skeletal warrior lunged at me, its blade aimed for my heart. I sidestepped and unleashed a burst of raw magic, shattering it into dust. The ground beneath our feet was slick with blood and ash, and the air was congested with the metallic tang of battle. Evie threw more potions, creating zones of safety and destruction, while Freya's healing magic kept our wounded in the fight. Corbin's sinister laugh echoed across the street. "You think you can stop me? You're merely delaying the inevitable." "We're almost there." Brad's voice was a rallying cry. He launched another boulder, smashing through a group of skeletons that had been trying to flank us. "Voss, cover me," I shouted, preparing a powerful spell. Voss nodded, and a wall of fire sprang up around me, protecting me from the encroaching horde. The ground trembled. Brad summoned a massive wave of earth to surge forward, crushing skeletons under its mass. Bones crunched and snapped, the force of the spell obliterating the undead forces in its path. Corbin's influence was still palpable, his unholy magic empowering the remaining skeletons. They moved with unnatural speed and coordination, their empty eye sockets glowing with a malevolent light. Freya continued her work, her healing spells keeping our fighters in the battle. "We need to find Corbin and end this," I shouted, my voice hoarse. Voss stepped forward. "We'll find him, Sage. And when we do, we'll make sure he pays for this." His voice was cold, with a promise of retribution. The clash of weapons, the roar of spells, and the cries of the wounded floated on the winds. "Look!" Brad pointed skyward. A figure descended from the heavens, riding on gusts of wind. Professor Elderwood. I couldn't hide my disbelief, and I had no idea which side he was on. "Let's turn the tide," Elderwood said, his voice deep and authoritative. He raised his arms, summoning a cyclone that tore through the skeleton ranks, scattering bones like leaves. There would be time to question alliances later. Right now, I was just grateful for the assist. Elderwood's wind magic was a breath of fresh air. Literally. Perhaps we stood a chance after all. "Impressive," Voss said, nodding appreciatively at Elderwood's display. I rolled my eyes. Men and their egos, even in the heat of undead battle. "Focus," I barked. "We're not out of this yet." "Right," Brad said, launching another volley of rocks. "Stay vigilant." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one internally monologuing and questioning everyone's motives. But hey, I guess that's just the burden of being the plucky heroine. "Voss, behind you," I shouted, spotting two skeletons converging on him. He turned too late. Bone claws ripped into his chest. Blood poured out, staining his immaculate robes. The skeletal fiends cackled in eerie unison. "No!" I screamed, sprinting toward him. Magic buzzed at my fingertips as I cast a barrier spell to push the skeletons back. But it was too late. Voss collapsed, groaning in shock and pain. Well, this day just kept getting better and better. First undead armies, now fallen allies. I was starting to think I should have stayed in bed this morning. "Stay with me." I knelt beside him, hands glowing as I tried to heal his wounds. The magic sputtered, ineffective. "Come on, Powers, don't fail me now. I was a witch, not a miracle worker, but throw me a bone here." Pun definitely intended, given our skeletal party crashers. "Save your strength," Voss mumbled, voice barely audible. "It's too late." Damn it, no. Tears blurred my vision. There had to be something I could do. I couldn't lose another person. Not like this. "Freya?" I called desperately. She appeared beside me. "He's gone, Sage." Her voice was gentle but firm. I stood, heart heavy, fingers trembling. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm me. Then anger took its place. This wasn't over. Oh, it was on now. Corbin picked the wrong witch to mess with. He wanted a fight. I'd give him a war. And I wouldn't be taking any prisoners, not that these skeletons would make good ones anyway. They were a bit too bare bones for my taste. "Corbin must pay for this," I said through gritted teeth. "He will," Elderwood replied, summoning a powerful gust that knocked several skeletons off their feet. Brad rallied the townspeople. With renewed fury, we fought on. My spells became sharper, more precise. Fireballs incinerated bone, bolts of lightning shattered skulls. Elderwood's wind tore through the enemy ranks, creating openings for us to exploit. "Freya, over here," Evie called, dragging a wounded witch to the healer's side. Freya's hands glowed with healing light, sweat dripping down her brow from the effort. "Keep them safe," I said, my gaze darting around for any sign of Corbin. Our combined efforts pushed the skeleton army back. Their numbers dwindled, and for the first time hope flickered within me. I panted, casting another spell. My body waned, but I refused to stop. Not until every last one of those abominations was dust. I paused, glancing at the professor. His face was a mask of concentration, but I saw the grief behind his eyes. We had lost so much today. Finally, the last of the skeletons fell. Silence descended, broken only by the groans of the injured and the crackle of lingering magic. Is it over? Evie asked, voice wobbly. Not until we kill Corbin Grimm, I said. Then let's find the cowardly bastard and be done with it. Elderwood's voice was gruff but steady. I spotted Corbin near the marble fountain, his eyes feverish with an unnatural green. He was muttering incantations, trying to summon more of his undead minions. Fury surged through me. Corbin! I shouted, my voice booming across Emberwick Crossing. He turned, a sinister smile spreading across his face. Ah, Sage Holland. Come to meet your end? Not today. My hands were already forming intricate patterns in the air. My power pulsed raw and untamed. I could feel the anger, the grief, the need for justice fueling my magic. Let's see how strong you've become. The necromancer sneered, launching a bolt of necrotic sorcery towards me. I countered with a gust of pure, luminescent magic. It hit him square in the chest, knocking him back. He recovered quickly, retaliating with infernal tendrils that sought to ensnare me. You're going to pay for everything you've done, I growled, deflecting his attack with a shield spell. I poured every ounce of my strength into the next incantation, feeling the magic coalesce around me. By the power of the 7th level, by the light within me, I banish you, Corbin Grimm. I screamed, releasing the spell. A blinding light erupted from my hands, engulfing Corbin. He cried out, his form disintegrating under the force of the spell. When the light faded, he lay on the ground, barely alive. Why, you've grown stronger, Corbin wheezed, blood trickling from his mouth. Why? Why did you do all this? I demanded, standing over him. Questions. Answers, but your parents, they were part of a secret resistance, he choked out, each word a struggle. Against the supernatural uprising. They were brave but foolish. I crouched beside him. What are you talking about? Here. Corbin reached into his inside jacket pocket with trembling fingers. He withdrew a ledger and handed it to me. All the records, meetings, transactions. Including their elimination orders. You mean it wasn't an accident? My voice quivered with shock. Payment, made to a dark magic practitioner, a sorcerer hitman, discreet elimination. His voice trailed off as the life left his body. I stared at the ledger, my hands shaking. The truth about my parents' deaths was laid bare before me. They hadn't died in a random car accident. They had been murdered. Tears blurred my vision. Mom, Dad, I promise I'll find out who did this. I stood, clutching the ledger tightly. Resolve burned within me. This battle was over, but my fight for justice and truth had just begun.